Hey guys, tonight we drift along the cobbles of a Roman afternoon that's cooling toward dinner, and you angle yourself toward the public baths, the way a homing pigeon angles toward home, only with more street dust and fewer feathers. The sky hangs peach-coloured over tiled roofs, vendors close shutters with a clack, and you move with the tide of people who know exactly what they're doing, rinsing off the day before cena, because arriving clean is the difference between fitting in and being side-eyed by an uncle with opinions. You can smell olive oil, fennel and warm stone. A flute player tries a scale and misses twice. You probably won't survive this if you were actually transported here and tried to pay with a debit card, but for now, it's just you, your breath slowing, and the promise of steam. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing the map of sleepy dots light up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge past a fountain, where a boy splashes his sandals, and a dog decides that today is a bath day too, purely by accident. The thermae loom ahead, arches stacked like neatly folded towels, smoke breathing from roof vents. You want to time this right. Romans tend to bathe in late afternoon, easing from work to warmth to dinner, so you follow the crowd that grows a little more relaxed the closer you get. A hawker selling olives calls out prices, and you practice not making eye contact because if you break stride, you'll own 5 olives and 0 small change. You step beneath the portico, and the sound changes. Street chatter muffles, low echo takes over. This is a machine for comfort, and you're another cog dropping into place. A mainstream fact slides in as smoothly as your foot on polished stone. The larger imperial thermae could serve thousands daily, a kind of civic living room complete with libraries, gardens, and hot-cold circuits of water that make your shoulders drop by instinct. You feel small and happily anonymous. You're a face in the steam-bound crowd, and that's exactly the point. The late-day angle matters. You show up dusty so that the first splash feels earned, and you leave glowing so that the first bite of dinner meets a clean palate and calmer pulse. You create a rhythm. City heat, cold food, sleep. Your skin, currently 2 shades darker than its morning self, endorses this plan. You promise it relief, and it promises you fewer comments from that uncle later. A pair of friends in tunics cut in front of you, joking about the day's accounting like numbers were gladiators. You catch a fringe tidbit in their banter. Someone swears by rubbing a little pumice mixed with oil to smooth the skin before the steam. Like polishing a statue, he says with a wink. And yes, it works better than the gravelly option you considered when you saw the dusty lane. You make a note. Pumice is your friend, gravel is not. Inside, your feet find the groove worn by tens of thousands of other feet, and you feel the pride of civilians who consider cleanliness a public good. You pass niches with Hermes and Athena, looking like they've been steam bathing for centuries. A whispery aside from your more modern self snickers. No SPF rating visible, and you keep walking because the sun's dropping anyway. The city's big bronze sundial hand moving toward a shared exhale. You check the crowd. Elderly men with silver hair and serene frowns drift toward the calmer rooms. Younger men, all elbows and ambition, cluster near the palaestra entrance, eager to throw a ball around before heat. You aim for the sweet spot, enough people to feel the buzz. Not so many that you'll have to queue for a bench like it's a Black Friday sale on tranquility. A child darts past, skids, and somehow rebalances with the physics of a cat. You file that away as one of those universal bath truths. There's always one slippery comet scudding by. Historians still argue whether most Romans bathed every single day, or several times a week depending on class, schedule, and water access. But the late afternoon crush you're moving through suggests that, for city dwellers with a few coins to spare, the habit is frequent enough to feel like a rite. You tilt your chin to catch a breeze, threading from a high window, and smile at the architecture that makes air move like a concierge. A porter glances at your tessera, the little entry token you fidget in your palm, and nods you in with the bored grace of someone who has seen every sandal strap style yet invented. You tuck the tablet away and feel the day's weight recalcify into something you can shed. The stone underfoot remembers a million similar steps. You swear the floor knows how you walk before you do. Joke one lands quietly in your own head. Your sandals commit to a squeak you didn't authorize, a tiny trumpet announcing, "New here." You try to set them to silent mode, which in ancient Rome appears to be called walking softer. However, a fountain bubbles from a carved lion's mouth, and you cup water to your face, cool shock waking your skin like a bell. You inhale olive and thyme from someone's oil flask and miss, for a microsecond, your modern shower with the temperature lever that always needs a finesse degree in engineering. Joke 2. The hot-cold mixer at home asks you for a blood oath. Here, the caldarium asks only that you exist. Two bath attendants debate something in low voices, and you catch fragments. New policy, bucket rotation, the poet who sings too loudly. You file it under things to avoid, performing your latest epic in the steam room. On the wall, a polite carving reminds you to rinse before the plunge. Not for hygiene theatre, but because nobody wants the street's dust turning the caldarium into murky soup. Modern you approves, ancient you nods like you invented courtesy. You shoulder through the threshold where warm air kisses cooler skin, and a taller man smiles in that public place way that means, we are both here. Good. You return the micro smile, and a third joke quietly perches on your tongue. You've unlocked the achievement socially acceptable eye contact bronze tier. You'll aim for silver when you manage a nod without bumping anyone's oil flask. A magistrate in a purple-edged toga moves past with discreet attendance, all deference and minimal splash. Status follows people like steam follows heat, but in here it blurs. You feel the democracy of bare shoulders. Whatever reports he signs later tonight, he still waits for a bench like everyone else. You relax into that equality. As you angle toward the apodyterium, the dressing hall you'll reach soon, you let yourself savor the approach. You haven't even hit the first warm room, and already your breath has lengthened by a measure you could almost score like music. You watch a pair of servants carry linens, threads catching light like quiet comets, and you decide to learn by watching. Who lingers? Who moves? Who knows the shortcuts between rooms? Your inner map starts sketching itself, pool here, bench there, bright window north. Another mainstream fact threads the moment. Bath complexes often bundled libraries, lecture spaces and gardens, so that what looks like hygiene is also civic education and networking with a splash of mint oil. The thermae are your social network. No notifications, only nods. As you pass a low inscription warning about thieves in the changing rooms, Capsari can watch your clothes. But locks are more a suggestion than a guarantee you patch your bundle. And think of strategies, none of which include leaving your best sandals unattended. A fringe rumour floats by someone swears an old veteran keeps his coin in a hollowed soap cake, which is both genius and a hazard to the person who mistakes savings for lather. You take one more breath at the threshold, tasting the air's mineral edge, and let the city slide off your shoulders like a heavy cloak. The afternoon is tilting toward evening. The baths are tilting you toward dinner. You're about to learn why the timing matters, not as rulebook but as rhythm, a choreography between body heat and appetite. You step forward, your mind already undressing the day, ready to be earned clean by the first films of warmth and water. You palm the tessera like it's a secret handshake with the building, a small baked clay ticket warm from your skin and dusted with the city's day. The doorway yawns ahead, framed by columns that remember more sunsets than you have socks. The entry clerk sits behind a low counter counting coins, with a rhythm that could be a lullaby if lullabies had cash registers. He barely looks up, just the quick scan that tells him if you belong, which, in the baths, you do as soon as you decide you do. You place the token down with just enough confidence to say, I am a person of routine, even if your routine is mostly pretending you always know where you're going. The first impressions hit like stages of gentle weather. A warm exhale from the interior, a soft clatter of sandals, and the rippling chorus of voices tuned to indoor volume. To your left, a corridor seems to glow slightly, sunlight captured on marble and returned like a compliment. Straight ahead, shadowed arches hint at rooms where sound will draw long and low. You clock the crowd the way locals do, a quick scan of hems, hair, and who's flanked by attendants. You're not here to gawk, you're here to glide, so you let your gaze be a feather on water, present, polite, not sticky. Mainstream fact arriving on a cushion. Most urban baths charged a modest fee, small enough for working people to afford most days, sometimes waived by a wealthy sponsor or emperor to win hearts and quiet grumbles. You move with the knowledge that public comfort is civic currency. The clerk takes your coin, passes your tessera back with a notch scratched in it, proof you've paid today, and flicks his eyes at 3 doorways like a silent multiple-choice quiz. You read the cues. The busier door? Palaestra-bound folks and chatter. The gentler glow? Likely the tepidarium, the warm room that seduces shoulders into dropping. The darkest arch? Caldarium's heat domain. You are, for the moment, a traveller in a station of steam-bound trains. The entry hall has its own etiquette. You step aside to let an older man with a cane pass. He tips his chin in thanks like he's stamping your first page of Bath passport. A pair of gossipers hover near a wall mosaic of dolphins, speaking in that almost whisper that means they want to be overheard just a little. You smile into your shoulder. Joke 1. You attempt the ancient Roman equivalent of incognito mode by pretending to study a pillar, which works until the pillar fails to load new content. At the threshold, a porter gestures toward a basin where hands are rinsed, a splash that says, "Leave the street where the street belongs." You comply, and the water cups cool over your fingers, carrying away grit and any opinion you might have had about politics, olive prices, or the neighbour's rooster that thinks 3 a.m. is noon. The stone ledge is worn smooth by exactly this gesture, the city's collective exhale polished into marble. A fringe tidbit drifts by courtesy of the clerk who, seeing your interest in the tokens, mutters that some bathhouses stamp little symbols on tesserae palm leaves for festivals, dolphins for lucky days so attendants can spot free entry events at a glance. You picture a solemn accounting table covered in cheerful dolphins and decide bureaucracy could use more aquatic mascots. You tuck your marked tesserae into your palm's memory for easy reshowing. The bath is a place where hands do the talking. You pause, pretending to adjust your sandal, which, to be fair, squeaks like a timid mouse, just long enough to gather intel. The doorway scale matters. If you start too hot, you'll wilt. Too cold, you'll stall. You aim for that warm-lit corridor. It promises a soft landing before the deeper heat, a hello rather than a hug. Passing the entry desk, you nod at a small wooden board, listing the day's rules in tidy letters. No pushing, rinse before pools, be mindful of others' belongings. Another mainstream note shuffles in. Inscriptions warning about theft were common, because while the baths cleanse, they don't baptize away opportunism. You pat your clothes bundle like it's a sleeping cat and promise it you'll find a vigilant capsarius soon. The floor mosaic under your feet presents tiny blue tesserae stitched into waves, and you feel the metaphor working. Overtime sea inside land, comfort inside crowd, quiet inside noise. A boy darts ahead of you, balancing a stack of folded linens taller than his torso. He weaves through adults like water finds a path. You sidestep in sync, both of you performing the universal ballet of not colliding in public, and he gives you the quick, proud grin of someone who absolutely knows these corridors better than you. Historians still argue whether mixed bathing in Rome was common practice, or largely restricted by time slots and social norms depending on the era and locale. You glance around and notice the balance of bodies here, mostly men at this hour, a reminder that, practical or prudish, schedules were often carved along lines of custom. The debate floats like steam, real, present, and changing shape depending on where the light hits. Your eyes adjust as you step deeper, and the acoustics shift to a softer echo. Here, small talk unspools. How was the market? Did the Bakers' Guild settle their flour dispute? Which athlete slipped on the marble and pretended it was part of the routine? You think of your modern life's notification pings and decide you like the analog version better, the pleasant buzz of unurgent news. Joke 2. You briefly consider starting a newsletter called Steam and Updates. Then remember, writing on wax tablets near humidity is a recipe for modern art. By the entry arch, a tiny deity carved in relief Fortuna maybe peeks from a niche with a ribbon of bronze that glints like a wink. Someone has tucked a sprig of rosemary there, a little luck bribe that smells clean and peppery as you pass. Another tidbit, technically quirky but somehow inevitable. Some bathhouses were said to keep a lost and found shelf of the truly mysterious single sandals, mismatched fibulae brooches, and at least one strigil that allegedly belonged to a retired actor who autographed it with a scratch. You resolve not to become an anecdote on that shelf. A trio of fresh arrivals breezes in, the middle one broadcasting regular via posture alone, neither hurried nor slow, a pacing that says every room will be waiting for him exactly when he gets there. You borrow a note from his tempo. Your breath lengthens, your shoulders forget their address. The doorways rearrange themselves into a polite queue in your head. Apodyterium for undressing and securing your bits and bobs. Palaestra if you want a light warm-up. Then the smooth slide into warmth, hot-cool, like drawing a bow across a string. You pause at a wall map, a painted plan of the baths done in neat lines and gentle colours. It's the ancient version of a mall directory without the "You are here" star, so you add one in your mind. You notice a garden court with plane trees you'll want later for a sun-dapple cool-down. You notice a little library tucked near the exit, a place to drift past scrolls on agriculture, philosophy, or the proper dimensions of fish ponds. Trust Rome to have an opinion on koi real estate. Joke 3 sidles in. You imagine a scroll titled 10 Tips to Stop Your Sandals from Squeaking. A bestseller, surely. Another mainstream anchor. Many great bath complexes bundled leisure and learning lecture spaces, strolling paths, even snack stalls, so your entry token opened more than heat. It opened an afternoon's ecosystem. That's why first impressions matter. If the entry feels harried, you carry that speed into the caldarium and evaporate patience along with sweat. If the entry feels like a hand on the back guiding you forward, you drift. And drifting is the point. An attendant with a vine tattoo around his wrist catches your eye and taps his own chest in a universal "with me." You follow to the apodyterium doorway, already rehearsing how you'll arrange your things and the tiny script you'll use with the capsarius. A greeting respectful enough to say, "Please watch my clothes like they're your own." Casual enough to say, "I'm not new, I'm observant." You breathe in the threshold's scent: olive oil, hot stone, a whisper of time, and a bright mineral note that feels like the color white if white had a smell. Entry complete. First impression stored. You tuck the marked tessera behind your belt string, where you can flash it again without fumble. The baths have welcomed you, not with trumpets, but with practiced calm. You're inside the choreography now, about to undress the day under a ceiling that turns sound into velvet. The door ahead glows the color of warm bread. You step into the apodyterium and the air feels like warm linen, soft, dry, and politely scented with olive and clean stone. The room is bright from a high clerestory. Light pours in like silent music, catching on bronze hooks and neat cubbies carved into the walls. You pause just long enough to map the nearest free niche, then move with the kind of purpose that says, "I have done this before." Even if your sandals are still auditioning for the role of mouse with opinions, the noise here is a pleasant weave. Murmurs, a few clinks of fibulae pins, the low rub of fabric, the occasional soft laugh that means someone told a story just ridiculous enough to keep. You choose a spot with clear sightlines close enough to the capsarius, the attendant whose job is to watch your things, far enough from the busy aisle where stray elbows live. You keep your bundle tidy, because tidy looks like confidence, and confidence looks like not an easy mark. The capsarius glances over with professional boredom and a hint of assessment. You offer a small greeting, a coin quietly palmed, and an expression that translates to, "Please treat my belt, sandals, and pride as if they were your own." He nods once, the official stamp of someone is watching, and adjusts a peg so it stands at a protecting angle. Mainstream fact settles in like a folded towel. Theft at the baths was common enough that satirists wrote about it, inscriptions warned against it, and the capsarai existed as both deterrent and sometimes suspect. You keep your tessera tucked, your belt folded inside your tunic, and your sandals arranged heel to wall, an old trick that makes quick walk-offs inconvenient for anyone who isn't you. You tell yourself you're calm, then you choose to be calm. Undressing has choreography. You face your niche, not the crowd. You keep your limbs tidy in their arcs, no windmilling, no, "I'm a linen kite." You unpin the fibula with a controlled little twist, because nothing says newcomer like wrestling your clothes into submission. Joke 1 leans in, your tunic tries to be dramatic, and you counter with the ancient Roman art of nope, smoothing it flat like butter on warm bread. The capsarius watches this competence and files you under low maintenance, which is the golden category. You glance sideways once respectful, not staring because the apodyterium is also a newsfeed. A magistrate's towel is thick and clean. A baker's shoulders have flowers ghosts still clinging. A veteran's scars read like maps. You learn without ogling. Eye contact here is a 4-beat rhythm. Meet, nod, soften, release. Anything longer is gossip bait, and gossip, while delicious, is not the appetizer you need right now. A fringe tidbit arrives as a whisper from the next niche. Someone swears a famous mime popularized the trick of tying sandal latchets with a double tuck that makes them look stylish but slip off only for the rightful feet. You glance at your squeaky duo and try the double tuck. They respond with dignified silence. Joke 2. You mentally compose a thank you note to a performer you will never meet, and decide your sandals now outrank you in etiquette. You fold your tunic so the clean hem sits inside the fold, a polite way to keep it from brushing dust when it's time to redress. You lay your belt on top like a sleeping snake, and tuck the small oil flask under it, cork upward so it won't weep into your linen. The capsarius approves with a micro tilt of the head, a tiny ceremony that feels like a membership card. You hand him the small coin, modest, not theatrical. Generosity is a signal, but theatre can be read as, "I have more where that came from," and you prefer your money to look like a rumour. Historians still argue whether bathers typically carried their own small boxes. The loculi you see carved into walls suggest storage, or whether attendants provided most of the infrastructure, varying by city, period, and the bath scale. You look around at the mixed set, some personal baskets, some communal pegs, a few leather satchels, and decide the answer is a lived both, sliding along the line of comfort and coin. You stand now in the equalizing uniform of the baths. Essentially you, your skin, and the story of your day, written in dust you're about to erase. If you need a towel, you signal with 2 fingers, and the attendant brings one that feels rough enough to polish bronze, which bonus means it will do an admirable job later after oiling. You drape it with the casual ownership you've seen the regulars use, a shoulder cape that says, "I know where I'm headed." Joke 3. Somewhere in the city, a fashion guru declares this season's look is minimalist linen with a hint of confidence, and the thermae shrug, having invented it already. Unspoken rules float like steam. Don't drape your towel over someone else's pegs are tiny kingdoms. Don't block a narrow passage to debate olive varietals. Keep your voice at Library of Friendly Whispers, not market at noon. You learn that compliments, if offered, aim at the neutral. Good heat today. Smooth stone. Fine oil scent. Never at the body, which is here to vanish into warmth, not audition for comment. You watch a young man learn this the hard way via a withering look from a veteran who could flatten him with one eyebrow. Another mainstream anchor lands softly. The apodyterium isn't just a changing room. It's where the day's identities set down their props, toga edges, tradesmen's tools, clients' petitions, and people step into a temporary sameness before heat makes everyone equally shiny. The room thus hums with potential. Jokes traded, messages passed, invitations hinted. You keep your ears open and your mouth gently closed. The capsarius clears his throat, a tiny ahem that doubles as a signal to check your peg before you move on. You look. All is as placed. He points with his chin toward the palaestra door, as if to ask, warm up or straight to warmth? You choose to loosen the limbs a little, nothing extreme, so you'll sweat on purpose later, not because your joints petitioned the gods. You make a small circling motion with your hand. "I'll be back." He gives you the "I saw that" nod of a doorman who remembers faces like ledger entries. On your way out, a small carving near the door catches your eye. 2 strigils crossed over an oil flask, like a coat of arms for cleanliness. Patron of good dinner conversation. You'll borrow one later, but here in the apodyterium you clock the etiquette script in advance. Ask, receive, wipe, return, and crucially, don't pretend the communal strigil is your heirloom. There's a rumour carved into someone's smirk that a poet once forgot to return a nice bronze scraper and was forced to compose a public apology in hexameter. Fringe? Maybe. Effective? Definitely. You step aside as an older man navigates the pegs with the economy of someone who's rehearsed for decades. He folds, tucks, pats, and then like a magician produces a tiny cloth pouch. He presses it to his nose, nods with satisfaction, then returns it to a hidden corner. Scent? Camphor? Rosemary? You wonder if he learned the hard way not to leave it obvious. The apodyterium remembers. The apodyterium teaches. As your feet turn toward the palaestra, you give the room a last once-over for callbacks. Your sandals now less squeak, more whisper. Your tessera secure, your towel behaving, the capsarius in your corner. You float a private smile at the memory of the dolphins on the entry token, and imagine them escorting your belongings in a tiny aquatic honor guard. The joke warms you like a small lamp. You pass beneath the lintel with the light touch of someone who intends to bring this calm into the next rooms. The unspoken rules have spoken, and you've listened. Undress without dawdling. Pay the watcher. Be kind to the space and stingy with your elbows. Let eyes be gentle. The bath has a way of smoothing edges that are not just marble. You feel smaller in the best possible way, part of a choreography. One neat figure in a frieze of ordinary grace. And now, warmed by manners, you're ready to warm the body. You step into the palaestra, and the air changes again, taking on the grainy brightness of an open courtyard sun caught on sand, voices rounding off the edges of stone, the faint thud of leather balls greeting palms like old friends. Plane trees throw a lattice of shade over the perimeter portico, and you join the quiet drift of bodies warming their hinges. This isn't a gym that shouts at you, it's a courtyard that invites. You roll your shoulders, let your neck trace a slow circle, and the joints answer with tiny clicks, like amphora lids agreeing to open. You keep it light. Etiquette here favors moderation. Arrive limber, not legendary. The goal is glow, not glory, because the caldarium will do its own kind of heavy lifting soon enough. You start with a slow walk along the edge, heels kissing sand, toes tasting firmness. Your sandals now obedient thanks to the double tuck whisper approval. Joke one lands softly. You salute the palaestra with a stretch that resembles a heroic statue, and immediately downgrade to responsible citizen with realistic goals. A trainer watches the space with the practiced gaze of a lighthouse keeper, steady, sweeping, unhurried. He nods approval when you keep your arms' arcs tidy and your enthusiasm at polite. A few men play trigon, that three-person catch with a small leather ball, and their rhythm is a metronome for your breath left, center, right, back again. You're tempted to join, but you know the first rule of not looking like a tourist is to spend a minute reading the room. You hover at the edge, rolling your ankles, drawing invisible alphabets with your toes, letting muscles remember they were designed for more than sitting on benches judging olive quality. Mainstream fact slides in with the sun. Roman baths commonly included palaestrae, where patrons warmed up with light, exercise, wrestling, ball games, calisthenics before oiling and scraping. Warm muscles mean easier sweat, and easier sweat means less frantic blushing in the steam room later when the heat asks hard questions. You take that as permission to stay gentle. A slow set of squats just enough to wake the thighs, then a few forward folds with your towel looped behind the shoulders, the rough weave finding your shoulder blades like it has a map. A boy sprints past carrying a peeler, a slightly heavier ball, and you catch the trainer's eye. He gestures, a small "you" here, and lobs you a lighter ball that sings in your hands like a plum. You toss it up, meet it on the way down, and feel the weight settle your breath. Toss, clap, catch. Toss, clap, catch. Your brain smooths out, list-making pauses. The world narrows to leather and air. Joke 2. You briefly crown yourself consul of catching, then demote yourself when a slightly fancy clap ends in a slightly fancy fumble. No one mocks. This is not the arena, it's the on-ramp. You partner up with a baker whose forearms look like proof dough, strong, springy, well-rested. He throws true and soft, and you respond in kind, discovering a comfortable middle distance that keeps both of you within the shade's geometry. Your towel rides your shoulder like a small, encouraging bird. The baker grins and mentions, as if sharing a family recipe, that he adds a pinch of salt to his oil before scraping. He swears it wakes the skin. Fringe tidbit acquired. A salt-dusted oil can add a faint scrub without turning you into a human pretzel. You file it beside the pumice tip and the dolphins, your growing cabinet of bath micro-hacks. You take a break to watch a pair of wrestlers dance through a practice bout, no slams, just grips and shifts, the language of balance spoken with elbows and hips. Their feet sketch careful spirals in the sand, a reminder that even contact sports here obey courtesies. No gouging, no bragging, no dragging your opponent into the oil jar. You sip from the water jar at the edge cool, not cold, and let the mouthful fan out in your chest. The palaestra carries the smell of dust and linen, and a hint of crushed laurel from someone's wrist ribbon. Historians still argue whether elite Romans truly pursued exercise for health in a way we'd recognize, or framed it more as display, discipline, and preparation for military virtues. You can feel both stories tugging here. The magistrate from earlier passes with a cautious jog that looks like he's keeping pace with his reputation. The baker returns to his ball game like he's stoking ovens with his breath. You choose the third path. Move enough to be warm, not enough to be a tale. A trainer approaches with a small flask and asks, with a professional half smile, if you want a drop of light oil for the shoulders before you stretch deeper. You accept, rubbing the olive silk into your deltoids until they gleam like friendly apples. The sun licks the sheen and your skin says, yes, this is the correct century. You resist the urge to lather too much. Remember, oil now is for glide in movement. Later you'll add more for the scrape. Joke 3. You stage a micro-fashion show for the plane trees. Shoulders, the spring collection, and the trees applaud by not dropping anything on you. Your warm-up becomes a tiny itinerary. Wrist circles, slow lunges, a careful twist to wake the spine. each movement small enough to keep your pulse in the letters from a friend range, not urgent scroll from the Senate. The crowd tracks its own weather. Trigon players swap in a novice with a patience pact. A pair of older men walk the perimeter, narrating their grandchildren's exploits with the proud stoicism of men who learned long ago to be loud in content but soft in volume. Another mainstream anchor slips into your pocket. Authors like Galen wrote about the sequencing of exertion, light exercise, oiling, scraping, then the heat, emphasizing balance and the avoidance of extremes. You feel smugly aligned with medical advice 2 millennia old, which is the only kind of medical advice that arrives without a copay. Across the courtyard, a man displays a bronze strigil to a cluster of curious teens, describing with gusto how his grandfather once used one so polished you could shave by its reflection. The teens are impressed until the trainer coughs the internationally recognized cough for "Put the heirloom away before someone borrows it forever." You make eye contact with the teens and mime a scrape motion. They smile back, one adding a theatrical flourish that would be at home on a stage. You silently award it a laurel for enthusiasm. You finish with a slow walk to the shady colonnade, and a gentle heel raise at each column, 10 columns, 10 lifts feeling calves warm from the ground up. Your lungs become a pair of quiet fountains, steady and symmetrical. The palaestra returns you to yourself, but tidier. Sweat has arrived, but not as panic, just a silver film that tells you the caldarium won't be a shock. It'll be a continuation. You pat your towel into place and let your breath lengthen by one more notch. The notch clicks like a well-made latch. Fringe rumour drifts past from a pair of gossipers. There's a fellow who claims he warms up by reciting lines of Virgil while balancing a ball on his head, to train all faculties at once. You decide your faculties are sufficiently trained not to try that. Your faculties thank you by not toppling a water jug. On your way back toward the apodyterium door route to oiling, you pass the trainer again. He gives you a small nod and a "bene," which is currency in here. He gestures at a low bench, where a jar of light sand sits for those who like a pre-oil brush-off. You press 2 fingers to the sand, pat them against your palms, and appreciate the faint grit that wakes up the skin's surface without auditioning you for the quarry. This is the prelude to glide. Awaken, then anoint, then scrape, then soothe. You take one last look at the games. The trigon ball arcs in a tidy parabola and lands clean in a palm that closes like a promise kept. You feel the quiet thrill of being part of a practiced place, a civic comfort engine that runs on manners and steam. The palaestra has measured you and found you sensible. You answer by returning your ball, folding your towel's corner back into back, and stepping toward the doorway where oil flickers and bronze gleams. As you cross the threshold, you carry with you a small catalogue of the hour, the sand's white noise, the baker's easy throw, the trainer's lighthouse gaze, the shade's arithmetic, and your own body, now a cooperative instrument rather than an orchestra tuning up in public. Heat waits, but it will not pounce. You've invited it. Your skin sings at a volume appropriate for libraries. Your sandals, finally, keep the perfect beat. You slide toward the oiling bench the way butter slides toward warm bread, fated, calm, and very ready to shine. The light in this corner has a honeyed quality, catching on bronze flasks and the curves of small clay araballoy that bob on cords like sleepy pendulums. You choose your station with care, not underfoot, not in the draft, just far enough from the splash zone that your first layer won't turn into salad dressing. A boy with a tray offers choices plain olive oil, a pricier blend with rose, and something ambitious that claims hints of saffron and the price tag to match. You nod at the humble amphora. Affordable, reliable, and less likely to announce you like a walking garden. You're here to smell clean, not like a festival float. You pour a small lake into your palm no more than a walnut, and warm it with a slow rub until it thins from silk to whisper. Oiling is not a self-baptism, it's a glaze. You start at the shoulders where the palaestra woke you, drawing long, even strokes down the arms, steering clear of puddles that will make the strigil skid later, like a chariot on rain-slick marble. The skin says yes. The olive says hello. You keep the motion steady, like you're erasing the day with a soft cloth. Mainstream fact arrives with the amphora's shadow. Romans commonly anointed before bathing, then used a curved scrape of the strigil to remove the oil, along with dirt and sweat. A practice that left skin polished and, according to more than one physician, morale mysteriously improved. You align with that science of morale. Your shoulders drop a degree you could measure with a plumb line. The rough towel from the apodyterium sticks out of a niche nearby, ready to assist post-scrape, and you give it a grateful glance like it's a future friend saving you a seat at dinner. You keep the oil modest on the chest and back, more like dew than drizzle, because the caldarium's heat will bloom it. Overdo it now, and you'll wear a slip-end slide later. You trace small circles over the elbows where life collects a few extra stories, then smooth down the forearms in clean lines. Joke one elbow's in, you award yourself Best Supporting Hands for their role in making you gleam, and you promise them a cast party in the cold pool later. Your hands accept graciously. A neighbour on the bench clears his throat and offers a tip like a secret handshake. If you add a pinch of salt, the scrape sings. You remember the baker's advice in the palaestra. Reach to the small salt jar and tap a little into your palm, just grains, not dunes. The blend becomes faintly gritty, like a coastline, and when you run it along the upper arms, you feel a light wakefulness without abrasion. Fringe tidbit secured and confirmed. Salt wakes the skin like a polite knock on a door. You give the jar a respectful nod. The universal language of, we will meet again. Scent matters here more than you expect. Not because you're trying to perfume the caldarium, but because certain oils carry social signals. Rose whispers, I can afford roses. Myrrh murmurs, I know a merchant. Plain olive says, I plan to eat dinner without headlining it. You choose plain, with maybe a rosemary ghost from someone's earlier hands drifting by. Your goal is to smell like clean skin that once knew a hillside, not a market stall. Joke 2. You imagine turning up to cena exuding odor-whole garden, and your uncle announcing, we dine on you then? You edit accordingly. You shift your stance as etiquette requires. One step back from the edge to avoid slippage. Towel draped over a shoulder corner at the ready. Flask close but not blocking the next person's reach. The space is communal, your elbows are not. You work oil into calves with mindful thumbs, then give the knees a friendly polish, remembering that knees have opinions and like being asked. Feet get just a breath of oil enough to soften, not enough to ice the marble. Your sandals, now schooled by the double tuck, sit obediently to the side like well-trained dogs pretending they didn't once squeak for attention. Historians still argue whether bathers typically brought their own oil or purchased it on site as part of the fee, with practices varying by city, class, and whether imperial generosity was footing the bill that week. You glance at the mix around you, personal flasks tied with cords, communal jars stamped with dolphin seals, and decide, as before, the answer is both, as suits the wallet and the day. The boy with the tray has the air of someone who can recite price tiers in his sleep. He likely does. You run a final, lighter, pass over places that like to hoard dust, the crook of the elbow, the line of the collarbone, the shoulder blade's edge, and then close the flask with a firm twist. No drips, no trails. The floor at your feet remains a boring miracle of dryness. You wipe your palms on the corner of your towel, then, crucially, wipe the flask neck so the next user won't inherit a slippery game of catch the amphora. The attendant notices and bestows a small, rare smile. Etiquette point scored. A mainstream anchor tucks itself into your awareness. Medical writers like Galen warned against strong perfumes for daily use, recommending simpler unguents for most bodies most days. Strong scents had their places, festivals, ceremonies, bravado, but baths were about reset. You hum in quiet agreement with a doctor long gone, which is the kind of compliance that doesn't hurt at all. Across the way, a dandy demonstrates a palmful of saffron oil to two admirers, insisting it makes the skin glow like dawn. Their eyes widen, your wallet winces in sympathetic pain. The attendant gently reminds him by way of a tactical throat clearing that communal benches prefer communal-minded quantities. He pivots, generously flicking a minuscule dot toward the niche statue, which will undoubtedly glow with dawn for the next hour. Joke 3. You picture the god reporting to the other statues later. Great news, lads. I'm the sun now. You check your own mirror. Not a literal mirror, but the sheen on your forearm under the honeyed light. It looks like the first breath on glass, not a spill. That's the threshold. You're oiled, not drenched. You leave the flask as clean as you found it and shift to the side to make room, offering a small primo to the next bathe a good spot, because compliments about positioning are currency that spends everywhere. A quiet debate trickles past from two regulars, whether one ought to oil before the tepidarium or wait until the caldarium. One swears the warm room opens the skin so the oil slides truer. The other insists that pre-warm oiling keeps the scrape more efficient. You smile at the eternal micro-choices that keep cities running. 1,000 tiny forks in the path that all lead to dinner if you keep moving. You decide on your version. A light pre-warm anoint, a fuller sheen just before the hot room entry for the scrape's best song. You finish by touching the pulse points with a whisper of rosemary. More memory than scent. Then wash your hands in the small basin, set for exactly that purpose. This prevents you from sharing slippery handshakes on the way to the strigil stand, a courtesy you'd like returned. Your towel re-perches on the shoulder, the corner turned in for grip. Your flask rests nested where the next person will see it without knocking it over. You have left the bench a little better than you found it, which is civilization in miniature. On the wall, an inscription of 2 dolphins, your old friends, frames a carved strigil and a tidy line of text that translates to something like, "Scrape clean, return clean." You accept the carved wisdom, consider the poet who allegedly had to write an apology ode for forgetting communal property, and vow not to test your meter today. The strigil stand glints from the next archway, bronze curves, waiting like moon slivers, and a calm attendant polishes one with a linen square, each pass neat enough to hypnotize. You inhale once more before stepping forward, tasting olive and warm stone and the faint, peppery breath of rosemary. Your skin hums at a quiet volume, the kind that invites heat without flinching. The oil has become a promise rather than a puddle. Your manners have become invisible, which is the best kind of manners. You're ready to borrow a tool, make it sing across your shoulder, and return it like a good story better for having passed through your hands. You drift to the strigil stand like a moon to its orbit, already half-shined and ready for the curve of bronze to sing across your skin. The attendant linen square in one hand, coil of patience in the other, meets your eye with that soft efficiency unique to people who keep shared things moving. You stop a respectful arm's length away so you don't crowd the tools or the person who knows where every tool has been. A small nod. A quiet salve. Your towel shifts on your shoulder like a bird resettling. He replies with the tiny uptilt that says, "I see you, I'll help you," and hands you a strigil whose edge glows the colour of old honey. Etiquette is a choreography of small kindnesses. You receive the scraper handle first, fingers dry, never oily, no one wants to inherit a bar of soap disguised as a grip. The attendant watches your hands instinctively wipe the inner curve with your towel's clean corner. One swift, visible pass to show you understand the ritual of yours for a moment, ours forever. Joke, one taps the doorframe. You resist introducing yourself to the strigil. "Hi, I'll be your operator today because conversation with hardware is a step too far, even for the whispery acoustics of the thermae." Mainstream fact slides in with the bronze shine. Strigils were standard kit in Roman and earlier Greek. Bathing culture curved metal scrapers, usually bronze or iron, used to remove oil, sweat, and dust after anointing. Athletes, soldiers, and ordinary bathers alike relied on them. More than one grave has yielded a strigil looped with an ariabolos, as a kind of hygienic necklace for eternity. You can't help picturing your little oil flask and this crescent blade as a matched set. Like dolphins bracketing a fountain, your old tiled friends showing up again as if to applaud good housekeeping. Before you scrape, you ask the quiet question with your eyes. Here, or in the next room? The attendant gives a chin flick toward a small alcove just off the tepidarium, a way station where the air's warmth is friendly but not yet bossy. Perfect. You move aside to make room for the next borrower and, crucially, do not hover like an impatient crow. Communal tools run on grace and gravity. You supply the grace. In the alcove, you test the edge with a fingertip, not sharp like a knife, more like a butter knife with ambition. The angle matters. You set it at a gentle tilt, less than halfway to perpendicular, so the curve skates, not digs. Shoulder first, draw the arc from collarbone toward deltoid. Steady pressure, slow tempo. The sound is a quiet, almost imaginary squee that your brain reads as clean. Olive, dust, and a little salt gather in a pale ribbon along the inner curve, like evidence that the day is loosening its grip. You wipe the blade on the towel between strokes. Ritual becomes rhythm, becomes permission to exhale. Fringe tidbit sidles in from memory and rumour. The mixture of oil and sweat the gloyos scraped from athletes was sometimes collected and sold as a tonic or cosmetic, a practice that sounds like a marketing meeting invented it 2,000 years early. You glance at your very modest ribbon of the stuff and decide it's going straight to the towel. Thank you kindly. Meanwhile, the baker from the palaestra reappears at the edge of your vision and gives a thumbs up when your stroke cadence finds its groove long, even, unhurried, with a pause at the wipe so the next pass starts clean. You switch sides. The strigil glides along your sternum like a skater tracing a figure eight, then down the side of ribs, where dust likes to whisper secrets. Don't chase every flake. This isn't a tax audit. The goal is polish, not penance. You keep your elbow close so you don't accidentally violin bow your neighbor. Joke 2 raises a hand. For exactly 1 second you consider trying a fancy flourish at the end of a stroke purely for style points. Then recall the universal truth that flourish precedes fumble. You choose the most elegant move of all. Not doing that. A small queue forms at the alcove and you show you know the code. 2 passes per area. Wipe, step aside. Back in, 2 passes, wipe, step aside. You are a tide, not a dam. When you switch to the back harder to navigate, you signal lightly to the baker, who obliges with a practiced partner scrape across the shoulder blades, edge parked where it kisses skin but doesn't nag it. You return the favour, checking in with a murmured "Benet," and adjusting until his answering "Bine" lands with contented weight. The scrape makes a soft hiss, like parchment turned in a quiet library. Historians still argue whether bath attendants commonly provided the scrape as a paid mini-service, or whether most pairs simply helped each other, favour trading polish for polish depending on time and coin. Watching the room's informal barter, 2 friends, 1 father and son, 1 kindly veteran and a nervous first-timer. You can feel how both models coexisted. Economy in one corner, friendship in another, a sliding scale of coin and custom. The attendant floats between, available, unintrusive, ready to step in where hands shake or backs refuse to bend. You work down the arm's forearm to wrist, never across tendons, always along the grain. The inner curve collects a thin, opalescent trace, towel, wipe, reset. Calves next, with a knee's gentle bend to present the right angles. Ankles, careful bones are opinionated. Feet get a ceremonial pass light, not slippery because you'd like to reach dinner alive and upright. You remember the rosemary ghost you tapped at your pulse points and smile at how it now whispers through the warmth like a friendly herb garden stowed in your collarbones. Another mainstream anchor drifts through the steam. Medical writers advise scraping until the skin flushed, but before it reddened, moderation that kept epidermis happy and egos unpunished. You keep to that middle path, listening for the body's enough now tone, which sounds suspiciously like a grandmother. Across the alcove, a show-off ignores that voice and bears down until a companion takes him into gentler waters. The strigil is a comma, not an exclamation point. The borrowing part matters as much as the scraping. You finish your set, then clean the curve meticulously with a fresh fold of towel once, twice followed by a quick rinse in the little basin reserved for tools. You dry the handle so the next hand meets dry metal, not surprise. Then, and this is the flourish you allow, you warm the blade a breath in your palm so it doesn't shock the next user with a cold first touch. You carry it back handle first to the attendant's open, steady hand. You say, "Gratias." He says, "Veil bene." There it is. The entire social contract in 2 words, and a crescent of bronze. Fringe rumour drifts from a pair of gossips near the doorway. A poet who once borrowed a fine bronze scraper and forgot to return it was sentenced socially, if not legally, to compose a public apology in hexameters and to fund 3 new tools stamped with dolphins. You glance at the stand and, sure enough, 2 strigils gleam with tiny dolphins near the handle's ring, like civic mascots reminding everyone that generosity has a logo. Joke 3 ambles in as you pass the stand. For half a heartbeat you consider proposing a loyalty program. Borrow 9, return 9. The 10th also returned, and then remember the baths already run on a subtler currency called not being a nuisance. You decide to cash in heavily there. A soft debate bubbles up in the warm air near your ear. Whether wiping the blade with linen first or rinsing first is more hygienic. One regular claims the linen traps the oil so the rinse finishes the job. Another swears rinsing first prevents smearing. Historians still argue whether specialized cleaning protocols existed or whether common sense ruled, shifting by bath and season. You enact the compromise wipe, rinse, dry, and feel smug for inventing the middle path that probably existed all along. As you step away, you notice a quiet sign near the stand carved, not painted 2 small lines of Latin that would translate roughly to "Use clean, return cleaner." You love that. It's impossible and perfect, the kind of aspiration that turns a room full of sweaty strangers into neighbours. Back in the flow, your skin feels new coin smooth, not glittering, not showy, just honest metal, recently struck. You inhale and catch the caldarium's deeper breath from beyond. Wetter heat, low conversation stretched into silk. The tepidarium waits between like a handshake in a hallway. Your sandals still silent, bless the mime's double tuck hold their poise as you pivot toward the warm room. The hard part of asking, borrowing, and returning is behind you, and it felt less like a transaction than a brief duet with a tool shared by a city. You imagine the many hands, the many days, the long ribbon of gratias, threaded through time like a string through bronze. You hum along without making a sound. You step into the tepidarium, and the world exhales to your exact temperature. Warmth meets you like a host with impeccable timing. No shock, no sizzle, just a soft invitation that drapes over shoulders and settles the bones into cooperative alignment. The room glows with a mellow light that seems to arrive pre-filtered. Mosaics of palm fronds and small birds lounge on the walls as if they, too, prefer the warm middle. Voices here fold themselves into velvet. Conversations ride the air at the volume of confidences, not proclamations. You match it, letting your words, when you use them, be shaped like round stones rolled smooth by a patient stream. Your skin, newly polished by the strigil, drinks the air and returns a quiet shine. The bench beneath you is warm but not possessive. You test it with a hand, then with the curve of your spine, and find the angle that makes exhaling automatic. Ritual continues with smaller gears now. Wipe the back of your knees, tuck the towel edge so it won't slip, place your feet so they're out of anyone's path to the door. You keep the borrowed tool manners, even without a tool. The room notices. A nearby bather offers an almost smile, the tepidarium equivalent of applause. Mainstream fact hums under the tiles. In many complexes, the tepidarium worked as a physiological bridge, preparing bodies for the caldarium's heavy heat and protecting them from sudden temperature jolts that doctors warned could tighten the chest or churn the stomach. You listen to the long-ago physicians by listening to your breath. It steadies to a two-part lullaby, inhale through the nose, exhale through the lips, like tide over a very patient beach. Across from you, a niche houses a small statue of Venus, wringing water from her hair, drops carved into stone with the kind of tenderness that makes you want to wring out your own. Joke one rises like steam. You consider asking the statue for her conditioner routine. Then remember, she's stone, and the only product here is time plus olive oil. You let the joke dissolve with your shoulders. Etiquette shifts in the tepidarium. Where the palaestra tolerated a little clatter, this room prefers choreography you can do with your eyes closed. Feet move like whispers. Conversations begin with a soft clearing of the throat, or a towel folding sound that counts as a knock. You experiment with that knock fold, pat, pause, and ask the baker, now seated 2 benches over, how the salt trick pairs with heat. He holds up 2 fingers, meaning 2 grains in spirit. A little goes a long way, especially before steam. You nod, file it next to rosemary, and adjust your inner alchemy from eager to measured. How so? Historians still argue whether the tepidarium was primarily a social room for lingering talk, or mostly a transitional space with limited loitering depending on crowding, fee structure, and local habit. You can feel both versions at once. A salon if the benches breathe, a corridor if the doorways hum. Today it is a salon with a clock, no rush, but momentum toward the caldarium like a river that knows its mouth. A fringed tidbit floats by on a low current from 2 old-timers exchanging lore. Some swear by a tiny dab of melted beeswax on cracked heels before the hot room, claiming it seals the promise until the cold plunge stamps it. You picture a beehive issuing foot care advice and decide the mental image alone has softened your arches. You do not, however, borrow anyone's beeswax. You're on borrowed strigil already. No need to collect the entire apiary. You trace your eyes along the ceiling. The vault is engineered for comfort, a coffered curve that gathers sound and light and returns them in smaller, calmer pieces. You feel the building doing work you don't have to do, moving air, keeping you central in your own body, shushing the parts of your mind that like to rehearse dinner conversations 2 hours early. Joke 2 pads in. You imagine a tiny librarian perched on the cornice, whispering inside voice to the steam, and the steam obediently shelving itself by topic. A pair of attendants pass with buckets that steam faintly at the lip. One taps the floor with a toe to test puddles. The other checks a brazier's ember bed with tongs that look like serious punctuation. The buckets slip through the doorway toward the caldarium like commas headed to a sentence that will continue in heat. You touch the bench once more and feel the faint heartbeat of hypercourse beneath the underfloor furnace, piping warmth through pillars of tile and brick. Another mainstream anchor clicks in. The hypercaust's genius wasn't just heat, it was distribution, a city-level commitment to making many rooms gently perfect at once. You sit on infrastructure disguised as comfort. The baker leans slightly, enough for his voice to find you without crossing anyone else's air. He asks if you'll go straight to hot after this or pause at the doorway like some do. 1 foot in, 1 foot out, counting heartbeats to let the skin decide. You admit you are a doorway pauser, a heartbeat listener. He approves as if you've revealed an informed voting habit. You toast him with your towel corner. He returns the gesture in kind. 2 citizens acknowledging the republic of warmth. A young man tiptoes in with the stiff caution of someone who oiled like a lamp and now fears sliding like one. He perches, then slowly redistributes himself over the bench with the seriousness of a geometer solving for non-skid. The room offers him patient non-attention, the gentlest gift. He exhales. Joke 3 lowers itself onto your shoulder. You bestow an imaginary civic medal, order of the controlled landing upon him, and tuck the ribbon under your towel so it doesn't get damp. Unwritten rules curl and uncurl like steam. Don't drip on others if you can help it. Do share space by inches. Let your silence be friendly, not forbidding. When you stand to stretch, you keep knees near the bench, so your movement occupies only your allotment of air. Your stretch is slow, an O of arms that opens and closes like a door that never slams. The baker copies it 1 beat later and mutters, "Bene," which counts as a co-authorship credit in the Journal of Joint Relief. You sip water small, frequent because warm rooms hide thirst. The cup is clay, the rim thick and reassuring. The swallow lands in your center with the exact weight of a good idea. You don't talk about the water. You let it be anonymous heroism. The tile beneath your feet, a field of pale tesserae with tiny blue fish, looks cooler than it feels. Your toes line up on a grout seam like nervous soldiers and then, realizing they're in the tepidarium, relax into civilians. Over by the door to the caldarium, a regular silver hair, bronze patience performs the doorway ritual. He stands where the warm of here greets the hotter of there, counts 5 breaths, steps a foot across to feel the next world, steps back, smiles, and waits for his pulse to resume its best manners. You memorize his timing like a recipe. 5 slow breaths, 1 curious foot, retreat, breathe, proceed. The baths are choreography. Repetition makes grace feel like instinct. A murmur of debate threads the benches. Whether speaking of business in the tepidarium is civilized, because no one can shout, or uncivil, because comfort should not be priced. You decline to join, which is its own etiquette. In another corner, 2 friends exchange trivialities. The weather over the Tiber, the soprano hawker at the olive stall, the latest rumor about dolphin-stamped strigils, trivialities that mean we care to carry each other's smallest weights. If you close your eyes, the room becomes a listening lesson. Far brazier, near drip, a sleeve sliding against skin, a cup set down, a breath shaped by a mosaic bird's endlessly open beak. When you open them, your focus returns to the door where the heat darkens slightly like tea just before it's perfect. Your towel knows what to do. 1 last calm pat over the arms, a fold that gives your hands purchase, not slickness. You align your sandals, still saints of silence, thanks to the mime, and lift your chin into the path that warmth has laid. You rise without drama. That is the tepidarium's thesis. The body can change rooms without announcing itself. You pass the Venus again. She keeps ringing, eternally between drip and dry, patroness of all tidy transitions. The baker falls in behind you at the polite distance that says, "We're headed to the same place, not we are conjoined." The door's stone jamb is pleasantly warm under your guiding palm, the way a porch post holds the day's sun even as evening collects the rest. You take your 5 breaths at the threshold, 1 for sandals that finally learn discretion, 1 for Rosemary's shy persistence, 1 for dolphins stamped into the city's habits, 1 for tools borrowed and returned cleaner, 1 for dinner that will taste better because of this exact pause. Then you cross your first foot into the caldarium's breath. Let the hotter air greet your shin, and step back once more to smile into the tepid world that just taught you how to enter a hotter one without haste. The caldarium breathes on you like a quiet kiln, humid, purposeful, and absolutely uninterested in your small talk. Heat stands up to meet you, taller than the doorway, and you reply with the manners of a guest entering a private home. Slow steps, shallow footprints, eyes that say thank you. The air is dense enough to feel shaped. It cups your face and presses your shoulders into a softer slope. You clock the geography in a single sweep. the low steam drifting like chiffon, the alveus, the hot pool glimmering under lamplight, benches along the walls polished to a patient shine, and near the entrance, the labrum, a broad marble basin of cool water that catches the room's glow like the moon catches sun. You do not rush the best bench. You do not, under any circumstances, cannonball. Rookie mistakes tend to be loud. Caldarium grace is inaudible. You observe the rotation, an unspoken loop that moves bodies from door to bench, to pool to bench, to labrum, and out again, a clock without hands. You stand just inside until a bench space opens, signalling your intent by folding your towel once, then twice, then letting it rest across your forearm. Someone rises. Their place becomes a polite question mark in the steam. You answer by moving there at a speed that neither suggests desperation nor dawdling. It is the middle path, again and always. Mainstream fact slides in on the heat. Caldaria were fed by hypercaust furnaces, hot air and smoke moving beneath raised floors and up flues hidden in the walls, with large bronze boilers heating water so that the room stayed saturated with warmth and the pool could simmer at a practiced degree. You feel that engineered kindness under your feet, the tiles warmer near the wall, gentler near the door, like the building itself is a host, adjusting cushions before you sit. You test the bench with the back of your hand, then lay your towel in a single courteous layer, edges tucked so they won't creep onto your neighbour's territory. You sit, then recline by degrees, as if to tell your skin, we are in conversation, not on trial. Across the room, a regular performs the micro-pantomime of too hot, with the dignity of a senator acknowledging a point. He shifts to a slightly cooler spot. The rotation ripples one notch. You inhale, you exhale, and your pores open like little windows that have been reading the weather all afternoon and are now permitted a view. Joke one steams up and traces a smile on the glass of your mind. You consider issuing a public service announcement. Attention bathers, splashing is a misdemeanor. Cannonballs are treason, but the room's quiet persuades you to keep your legislation internal. Etiquette in the hot room is mostly subtraction. You subtract volume, you subtract flourish, you subtract any move that would convert another person's heat into your surprise. When you ladle hot water over your shoulders from the small side basin, you do it slowly, angling the bowl close to the skin so the stream arrives like rain that practiced. You check the splash radius with an eye and a conscience. Your towel remains your border and your anchor. You dab, not scrub. The communal steam has already done the scrubbing. Historians still argue whether every caldarium offered a true hot plunge in the alveus, or whether many relied more on vapour and splash basins, varying by region, size, and emperor's budget. Some ruins show generous pools, others only the labrum's marble moon. Today, the alveus glows, a rectangle of patience. You will enter it without theatre. Before you rise, you use the labrum's cool gift, 2 handfuls to the face, a fingertip across the brow, 1 sip in the palm for the back of the neck. The shock is gentle, meant to temper hubris, not heroics. A fringed tidbit floats up beside the steam. A few regulars tie a sliver of damp linen over the crown like a primitive sauna cap, swearing it wards off lightheadedness. Others tuck a sprig of bay at the ear to keep the mind from wandering. You choose the linen trick neat, discreet, and skip the bay, unless dinner is serving prophecy. You step to the pool's lip and let your calves negotiate with reality. Water folds around shins, then knees, then thighs. You lower by slow arithmetic, 1 breath per inch, until you're seated on the ledge with your arms draped along the rim like a laurel wound into human form. The heat in liquid confers a different citizenship than the heat in air, more enveloping, more insistent, a law you accept with a nod. Your skin sings without words, a hymn learned earlier in the tepidarium and now sung 1 octave higher. Joke 2 floats by with a bubble from the corner. For 1 second you imagine inventing the Roman smartwatch, a pebble you move along the rim to time your soak. Then you remember you already own the only timer that counts here, your breath, and you move the pebble back to anonymity. Across the pool, the baker lifts a hand in a slow salute, the motion so unhurried it could be mistaken for a leaf falling upward. You return the salute with 2 fingers, then close your eyes long enough to sense the hypercaust's pulse in your bones. Another mainstream anchor settles. Medical writers advised moderation in the hot room, warning that staying until faintness, especially without a gentle cool-down, invited headaches and wobbly stomachs. You set your internal meter to glow, not boil, and let the minutes soften you into obedience. Rotation continues without anyone ever announcing it. Someone nearer the far bench stands. The space resets. The pool lanes itself by intuition, not rope. You shift your shoulders, giving the water fresh skin, then lift one arm to let a rivulet trace the long route from wrist to rib. You think of the Strigils arc earlier, and how this is the water's turn to write you clean. A boy near the steps tests a splash, sees the nearest adult's eyebrow become a full sentence, and reconsiders, settling for a dignified ripple. Joke 3 tips its hat. You compose an imaginary chapter from the Etiquette of Heat. Chapter 8, on the controlled ripple, and dedicate it to that eyebrow. The labrum calls again. You answer. Back on your feet, you move with the room's tempo unhurried, precise, mindful of wet tiles that love a comedy of errors. Your sandals, taught by the mime and rewarded by silence, hold steady. You stand at the labrum. The marble's cool lip meets your palm like the rim of a full moon. You scoop and pour, scoop and pour. Across forearms, the back of the neck, the pulse spots behind the ears that say yes to equilibrium. The temperature delta is choreography. You mark each step so your heart learns the beat, rather than being surprised by it. A tiny debate bubbles near the door, whether a brief cold splash mid-caldarium is invigorating clarity or rudeness to the room's covenant. Historians still argue whether prescribed sequences were stricter doctrine or flexible guidelines shaped by local habit. Your choice is the polite middle, cool at the margins, hot at the heart, and when in doubt, reduce splash radius to a teacup. You return for a final, shorter sit, the way you might return to a sentence you liked and read it once more aloud but softer. The bench greets you with familiar heat. You receive it with less surface to offer, more gratitude to listen. Your breath goes long, your thoughts go wide, then pleasantly blurry, like mosaics viewed through steam, still true, just softer around the edges. You catch Rosemary's faint ghost again, and decide tonight's table will welcome a cleaner, kinder version of you. When you rise for the last time, you do it in 2 motions with a pause between, giving your pressure a chance to catch up with your height. The room approves by not tilting. You fold your towel with the corner you kept dry, dab at the temples, and step aside so the space you held can revert to neutral. You bow barely, a nod really to the labrum, then to the alveus, then to the hypocaust you cannot see but absolutely feel. The baker falls in 2 heartbeats behind you. You let the doorframe cool your knuckles as you pass, a handshake between rooms. In the threshold, the tepidarium's milder breath greets your newly minted skin like applause made of air. You have done the hot room without theatre, without splash, without hogging the prime bench like a dragon on a hoard of steam. You carry out only what the caldarium meant to give: loosened muscles, quieter thoughts, and the kind of glow that turns dinner into an earned ceremony rather than a refueling stop. The rotation closes behind you, neat as a seal, already welcoming the next set of careful feet. You coast back out of the caldarium feeling like newly kneaded dough, pliant, warm, agreeable, and the tepidarium catches you the way a friend catches an arm at curbside. Steady, unshowy, perfectly timed. Heat has unstitched the day, which makes this the ideal moment for that second, gentler round of oil and scrape the polish pass. The one regulars swear gives you the satin finish that makes dinner conversation glide. You angle toward the little service niche just off the warm room, where a row of ariballoi hang like sleepy fruit and a tray of strigils waits with crescent patience. The attendant recognizes the look on your face, the "one more shine, please," and sets a bronze scraper on a folded linen with the ceremony of placing a spoon by a pudding. You repeat the choreography without commentary, because repetition is its own kind of praise. A thimble of oil warmed between hands, a quick hello to your shoulders, a ribbon along the collarbones, no puddles, no drama. The earlier pass lifted the grit of the day, this one erases the footnotes. You stand with one foot slightly forward for balance, and angle yourself so your elbows don't colonize anyone else's air. Even here, where everyone glows like a low-banked ember, personal space is mapped in courteous inches. Joke 1 pads over. You award yourself the title Surveyor of Steam Fronts for setting tidy property lines no lawyer would challenge. Mainstream fact hums along the bench. Many bathers did in fact oil and scrape twice. Once preheat to loosen and lift, once post-heat to gather what the pores offered before the final cool plunge. Physicians liked the order. Etiquette liked the neatness. Your skin likes the symmetry. You set the strigil at that practiced angle, gentle tilt. Never gouge and draw it down the warm shoulder with a stroke so smooth you could butter bread with it. The curve collects a pale sheen of oil and recent heat. and you wipe it on a fresh fold of towel, the clean-on-clean rule that keeps the tool from writing your past onto your present. A small traffic moment arrives, the kind the baths handle better than most streets. Someone doing a similar routine steps back and brushes your towel hand with an apologetic knuckle. You both deploy the choreography of grace. The quick, "my fault?" face, the equally quick no-harm eyebrow, a shared micro-smile, then a mutual half-step that re-establishes borders with zero fuss. You return to your shoulder, they return to theirs. The room inhales once and keeps humming. Historians still argue whether the reputation for Roman boisterousness fits the bath at all hours, or whether these spaces taught a daily civility that moderated the city's louder proclivities. Watching the ripple close over that elbow bump like water over a pebble, you vote for the second thesis, at least in this hour, in this room. You rinse the strigil in the hand basin, then park it handle down for a breath so excess can run away from the grip, another tiny kindness for the next user's fingers. A fringe tidbit drifts from the gossip's corner. There's a barber in another quarter who claims he can read fortunes in the swirl of used oil on a towel. Good harvest, bad lawsuit, avoid figs. You consider offering him your linen as a Rorschach of relaxation, and decide the only prophecy you need is cena soon. Calves next. 2 smooth arcs per side. Wipe, reset. Ankles like skittish cats approach gently. Do not startle. The back of the neck, the place where worries knot themselves into sailors, gets a ceremonial pass that feels like untying a week. You keep your feet square and your profile small. The niche is a stage only in the sense that everyone performs, not making it one. Joke 2 knocks softly. You daydream an official placard. Act I, shine. Act 2, return cleaner than received. And then realize the dolphins carved on the strigil handles have been running this theatre since noon without your dramaturgy. You glance toward the doorway to judge your moment for the cold reset. The frigidarium's breath threads through the corridor like mint in tea. But first, the rinse. Not a splashy baptism that would repaint 3 strangers, just the bowl and shoulder duet you rehearsed earlier. Scoop, pour close, listen for the satisfied sigh of skin meeting cooler water. A nearby regular clocks your care, and gives you the nod that lives somewhere between well done and you can sit at my table if all the benches are full. You pocket the nod like a coin. Mainstream anchor. Writers noted that a quick rinse after scraping kept pores from feeling overworked, especially before the cold plunge. Too abrupt, a shift-hot scrape straight to icy dunk-courted headaches. Your earlier doorway discipline pays off again. You stretch the transitions so your insides never have to sprint to catch up with your outsides. You pat the strigil dry, wipe the inner curve once more for decency, and return it handle first to the attendant, with the same gratitude you'd return a borrowed sentence that made your story better. Gratias, you say. Bene, he replies, which in Bath dialect means both you did fine and we'll see you again. The space. Another micro jam. 2 newcomers arrive at once, both reaching toward the same strigil. You soften your stance and become negative space, the rarest gift in a crowd, drawing your towel in so the corridor widens by an inch that feels like a foot. The attendant solves the duplication with a second polished crescent appearing from nowhere, the way good staff make scarcity vanish. The newcomers murmur thanks. You catch the way relief turns their shoulders from punctuation back into prose. Joke 3 flits past. You imagine the attendant has a secret pocket dimension labelled, in case of awkwardness, break seal, and you vow never to find its bottom. A low debate unspools nearby about order of operations. Oil scrape cold or oil cold scrape. One traditionalist insists the cold seals in the glow. A pragmatist counters that scraping after the cold avoids re-oiling the plunge. Historians still argue whether sequences were prescriptive or largely fashion, drifting by region and decade. Your compromise is anchored in courtesy. Scrape now so the cold pool doesn't become an oil slick, then towel pat later to leave the benches unshiny. The room, aware of neither your reasoning nor your monologue, nonetheless benefits, which is the best kind of decision. You pass the apodyterium sightline on your way toward the cold and spot your Capsarius, calm, mildly invested in your continued existence, making a round with his eyes. Your peg still holds your folded life. Your sandals still whisper loyalty. You answer his look with a small all-well smile. He responds with the almost imperceptible chin lift of a man who will not have to compose a lost property speech on your behalf. Somewhere, a satirist's pen goes hungry. Before you turn the corner, you tuck one more courtesy into the room. You sweep your bench space with the towel's clean edge. One light pass to pick up any freelancing droplets, then drape the towel back over your shoulder with the corner turned in so it won't drip on the threshold stones. You think of the motto carved near the Strigil stand: use clean, return cleaner, and admit it has crept into your bones like a tune. The baths are a school for small excellence. The diploma looks like an undisturbed floor. You ease into the corridor. The air tilts cooler by degrees. Voices sharpen a hair, not with volume, with focus. Every footstep becomes a decision again, not from fear, from attention. Your body carries the map of the last hour like an afterimage, the palaestra's sand underfoot, the oil's sheen in your palms, the strigil's curve singing its soft metal hymn, the caldarium's velvet sternness. You have repeated yourself on purpose and discovered that repetition isn't redundancy, it's refinement. At the corner you pause, alone for a heartbeat with a little wall mosaic where your dolphin friends are shown, leaping, one forward, one back, as if to bless those who move and those who return. You grin at them, ridiculous and sincere. Then you tip your face toward the hint of mint cold waiting ahead and step onward, ready to fold all that warmth into the clean punctuation of a plunge and, if the stairs are crowded, to share them in single-file peace, like a citizen who knows that civility is the only luxury that multiplies when you give it away. You slip into the frigidarium's orbit, and the air clicks cooler, like a fresh page turned by a careful hand. The room feels carved from clarity, pale light, sober stone, echoes trimmed to a neat hem. The pool itself is a tablet of blue glass, so still it seems to listen. You pause long enough to let your skin file a comment about recent heat. Then you file a comment back that says, "Yes, yes, we're doing this." Your towel perches on your shoulder with the alertness of a bird about to witness something heroic or comedic. The distinction will be decided by your entrance. The stair treads slope into the cold, like measured thoughts. You time your approach, because the etiquette here is choreography with sharper corners. No blocking the stairs, no sudden reverse gear, no thrashing that turns the pool into a salmon run. You count 2 bathers emerging, one gliding, one squeaking, literally squeaking, and you smile into your collarbone. You have learned from the caldarium that the room applauds inwardly when you behave as if you've done this before, even if your inner voice is busy drafting a will. Joke 1 whispers up from the steps. You nominate the squeaker for most honest soundtrack, and yourself for best stoic face in a supporting role. He was left-a-ninge. You choose a lane along the outer edge, where your exit won't tangle with anyone else's decision tree. 1 foot down, a thin collar of cold climbs your ankle like a rolled cuff. 2 feet down, your shins comment in italics. 3 treads, and the water reaches the knees, which file a formal protest in triplicate before accepting the new jurisprudence. You keep breathing long, transparent breaths that make the air feel drinkable, and you place both hands on the water's surface so your entrance writes smaller circles instead of urgent exclamation points. Mainstream fact arrives with the shiver. The frigidarium was a standard feature of large Roman bath complexes, intended to close pores, improve circulation, and complete the hot-cold cycle that physicians recommended for balance. Cold after heat was less punishment than punctuation, a crisp period at the end of the caldarium's long sentence. You nod to imaginary Galen on the balcony and continue your descent in tidy clauses. At chest depth, the cold wraps you fully, and for 2 heartbeats your mind rummages through the entire attic of excuses. Forgot the thing, left the other thing, sudden appointment with not being in this water, but you keep going until your shoulders are under, and there it is. The clean bell of alertness rung without noise. The room brightens by half a tone. Colours decide to be colours again. You realise your towel is watching with profound interest and try not to disappoint it. Around you, personalities reveal themselves. 1 veteran does the Roman seal, a smooth forward slide, then a serene float, arms out like a mosaic hero on holiday. A newcomer lowers like a hydraulic altar, millimetre by millimetre, as if bribing the water with patience. A 3rd bather conducts a personal symphony of gasps that he very nearly controls, very nearly. Joke 2 arrives in a polite tuxedo. You mentally award silent medals. Order of the Glide, Cross of the Controlled Gasp, Laurel of not splashing your neighbour, and pin yourself with the Civic Stair Management ribbon for staying out of anyone's way. You give the cold 1 slow circuit along the wall, fingertips trailing just enough to keep balance without broadcasting drama. At the corner, a marble mask spits a thin thread of water into the pool, its expression permanently surprised by centuries of spitting. You lean your neck into the falling line so it drills a clear dot into the crown of your head. The shock is bright, precise, and somehow funny. A fringed tidbit floats up as you blink. Some regulars swear by counting a prime number of breaths in the cold, 7, 11, 13, insisting primes confuse the body just enough to keep it humble. You choose 11 for reasons your skin will question later and begin counting like a very calm owl. Historians still argue whether cold rooms were always truly cold by our standards, or just markedly cooler than the hot suite, depending on season, region, and water source. Some frigidaria in warm climates might have been coolish, while those fed by mountain channels could sketch you an icicle sonnet. Today's pool plays the middle decisive but not punitive. You can feel your circulation right in bigger letters without your teeth applying for castanets. Rotation matters here more than anywhere. The stairs are a commons, not a couch, and lingering means choose a corner, not colonize an exit. You shape your path so arrivals find their runway clear, and departures don't have to invent a side door. When you sense a trio approaching, you slide to the far end and tuck yourself into a quiet float, knees bent, toes touching the wall, face angled toward the vault where faint daylight drizzles like thin silver. You listen to your breath, loosen its shoulders. The world simplifies. Stone, water, pulse. The distant polite clink of a cup somewhere in the tepidarium. A man with silver hair and an apprentice's patience enters the pool with that doorless glide you've been admiring all afternoon. He doesn't so much descend as reposition relative to the concept of cold. You attempt a modest copy, discover you lack his built-in hinges, and instead execute competent human being immerses body. The silver-haired bather approves with an almost smile that feels like receiving a stamp in your imaginary bath passport. Frigidarium, level 1, no splash. You keep an eye on your exit, timing the way a good dinner guest keeps an eye on serving trays. Step in before the tray empties. Step away before your hand becomes a traffic cone. When your 11 prime breaths are complete and your skin hums like clean glass, you move toward the steps exactly as another pair approach. A single micro gesture, your palms small after you. Wave sets the choreography. They descend. You pause one breath on the second tread to keep the top clear. Then you finish, water sliding down your shoulders like a gentleman's coat taken by a courteous servant. Back on the stone, the air feels warm because contrast is a magician. You resist the feral urge to towel flail. Instead, you press the linen with slow kindness along arms and ribs, then fold it once more to get at the dry inner kingdom you've been guarding. Your toes do the careful on-tile dance, and then remember your sandals, who, at this point in the story, are alumni of the Mime Academy, and glide without squeak. You make room at the towel rail for the next set of shoulders. The rail thanks you by not toppling. Another mainstream anchor drifts in as you wring your towel corner neatly. Bath sequences often ended with a cold pass to compose the body, before re-entering the world, closing pores, quieting pulse, and preventing the kind of languor that might make you nap at the dinner table. You test your pulse against the inside of your wrist and find it playing a friendly tempo allegretto, not allegro, and you sign off on your own readiness for clothes, street, and the idea of food that tastes brighter than it would have 2 hours ago. On your way out, you catch a quiet debate by the steps, whether it's better manners to submerge the head every time, or keep hair dry to avoid trailing rivulets through the apodyterium. Historians still argue whether head dunking was universal norm or personal preference shaped by season, style, and hair politics. You chose a crown drill from the marble mask and a careful towel pat before crossing thresholds. The floor, appreciative, remains a map without unexpected rivers. Joke 3 steps neatly into your path. You imagine a tiny customs booth at the pool's edge. Anything to declare? And you answer, only clarity, which earns you an imaginary stamp shaped like a dolphin wearing a laurel. You tuck it beside the other's palaestra sand, strigil sheen, caldarium glow, your passport of small excellences filling up one quiet page at a time. You linger a heartbeat under the vault to memorize the room's geometry, how the water holds the light like a well-kept secret, how sound trims itself to fit the stone, how everyone's bravery looks ordinary when done politely. Then you step aside to the doorway and check the stairs one last time, making sure your pause is not a plug. The frigidarium has reset you, and you, in return, have left it undisturbed. A trade as old as baths, and as modern as people deciding not to be the main character where none is required. You gather yourself towel modestly dry, sandals loyal, rosemary still a rumour at the wrist, and float toward the corridor where the air warms by increments. Dinner waits on the far side of clothing and streets. But this moment is the comma that lets the sentence breathe. You smile small, earned, unadvertised, and make space for the next person to discover how courage, when practiced quietly, feels exactly like courtesy. You coast from the frigidarium with that crystalline alertness that makes every doorway look freshly invented, and the corridor warms to meet you by civil degrees. This is the hour the smart regulars consider an elliptes, the professional anointer masseur who turns post-bath limbs into well-behaved citizens. You don't have to book one. You could towel, dress, and glide into the evening as is. But the benches ahead host a short line of people who clearly believe a few practiced hands are the last mile of etiquette before dinner. You join them with the relaxed decisiveness of someone ordering exactly the pastry they came for. The elliptes here, broad-shouldered, linen-sleeved, serenity in human form works under a small awning where light comes in polite, even strips. A low table holds flasks of plain olive, a modest rose blend, and one mysterious amphora labelled, in tidy script, after heat, before wine. You will not ask what's in that last one. You will accept that it smells faintly of laurel and citrus, and costs 2 more coins than the story you'd have to tell if you spilled it on your tunic later. Joke one strolls in. You mentally sign a vow. I will leave here smelling like a person, not like a symposium centerpiece. Mainstream fact slides in as easily as oil. The elliptes, a term inherited from Greek practice, was a standard presence in larger bath complexes, anointer and kneader of muscles, sometimes barber adjacent, sometimes athletic trainer adjacent, paid a small fee to help bodies transition from heat to street with fewer complaints. Price varies by neighborhood and fame. Tips small, discreet, smooth the edges of everything. You glance at the chalked board, plain oil at 1 coin, scented at 2, a brief limb sequence for 1.5, and you choose the modest set. Shoulders, back, calves, the walk to dinner like a poem package. Negotiation here is a duet, not a duel. You greet him, offer your coin visibly, not waved, not hidden, then place your towel where it won't drip onto his kit. You phrase your request in the Bath dialect of kindness. Light on the neck, firmer on the calves, please. And you add the magic line, if there's a better order, I'll follow. He nods, approves your humility, and taps the bench with 2 fingers. You lie prone and let the table's linen meet your skin like a page receiving ink. He begins with the shoulders, knuckles tracking along the trapezius in slow commas that persuade rather than prosecute. Olive wakes its own small sun over your back. Each stroke sketches warmth without reboiling you. The elliptes hums half a note under his breathwork rhythm. Surely, and you realize he's adjusting pressure to your breath's length. Another mainstream anchor lands. Writers like Galen cautioned that massage should complement, not undo, the bath sequence. No heroic pounding, no cold room shocks after deep kneading aiming at circulation, sleep, and appetite in balanced measure. You feel very seen by a physician 2 millennia away. Fringe tidbit floats in on the elliptes' low murmur. He mentions some clients request a nettle brush on stubborn knots, to wake lazy blood, a sting he claims works for certain hardy backsides. You decline with the universal bath gesture of perhaps another lifetime. And he grins so faintly the grin might be a rumour. He swaps to a linen rub, rough enough to polish bronze, gentle enough to file under comfort, and you feel the last of the caldarium's loosened dust surrender like the footnotes of a long day. Around you, the little economy of towels and tips runs on signals. When a person is finished, they fold their lintium in half and place it square on the bench, short edge facing out, space available, while a diagonal fold means stepping away but not done. You memorize the code the way you memorize doorway breaths. Small, consistent signs spare everyone from guesswork. Historians still argue whether such towel signals were standard practice or local folkways, shifting by bath and decade, but standing here, you can read them like street signs, evidence that strangers become neighbours by agreeing on corners and folds. He works the calves next, thumbs like calm anchors gliding down the gastroc, pausing where the muscle keeps its secrets. You breathe into his press and think kind thoughts at the palaestra for making these fibres cooperative. He cups the heel with palm, and heel with palm mirror against mirror, then traces the Achilles with a respect that says, "We've seen disasters. We choose not to audition." Joke 2 leans on the lintel. You picture an official proclamation. By order of the Senate and people, all Achilles tendons shall be treated like crown jewels, and you sign it with both feet. When he reaches the neck, you remind him light please, and he obliges with fingertips that feel like someone teaching your head a lullaby. The room's soundscape thins to essentials. Linen whisper, distant trickle, an attendant's soft benet to a careful pour. You catch rosemary again at your wrist, now harmonizing with olive and a hint of laurel from the before wine, blend drifting from the next table. You are a simple herb garden arranged by gravity. Payment happens in the tone of the place. The posted price is coin on the table. The tip is a quiet slip, palm to palm, when he returns your towel. No ceremony, no speech, just the handshake of gratitude. You add a small coin because he caught your breath's rhythm and respected your neck's opinions. He accepts with the non-smile that equals noted, which in service dialect is as warm as applause. A low debate simmers 2 benches over, whether to take a full-body knead after the cold plunge or keep it brisk to avoid reflushing the skin. One regular swears by a long session to lock in glow. Another counters that lingering can make you drowsy enough to nap in your shoes. Historians still argue whether post-bath massage was usually brief, functional, and athletic, or lengthy, perfumed, and theatrical, depending on class, hour, and purse. You split the difference. Focused work now, lingering gratitude later over bread and olives where your only appointment is with a chair. The elliptis finishes with a towel press, no rubbing, just weight down the length of the back, and once across the shoulders, sealing the olive like an oath. He hands you your towel with the handle first courtesy of a strigil return, and you answer with the same neat manners. You step aside to dress the bench for the next body, fold your linen in the square, space available, and run a quick dry pass over the floor where your toes made brief weather. Use clean, return cleaner carved near the strigil stand has apparently signed a 2-room lease in your head. Fringe rumour wafts by from the barber's corner. There's a sharp fellow who offers a pre-cena jaw tune. A tiny mandibular massage, he claims, sharpens conversation and makes olives taste greener. You let the image of someone kneading your chewing muscles roam free, then corral it. Your jaw votes to remain an unmassaged democracy. Joke 3 arrives like a late-arriving friend. You consider asking for a certification. This person is ready to sit at a table without complaining, to pin to your tunic. Instead, you accept the deeper badge. Shoulders that don't audition for tragedy masks when you lift an amphora of water disguised as a cup. You watch a regular settle his account with elegant brevity. Coin on board, towel squared, nod to elliptes, nod to waiting, bather, out. The choreography is so clean it could be taught to geese. You try it on. Coin, already handled. Towel, already squared. Nods executed, with your best local angle. The tiny economy hums. Nothing sticks. Everything slides the right distance and stops exactly where it should. One last mainstream anchor before you move. Towels, lintea, and sudaria weren't fluff clouds. They were serviceable, sometimes coarse, sometimes better, reusable cloths that did more polishing than pampering, which is perhaps why their folds carry messages. You can't hide in plush here. You communicate in corners and edges. You stand, stretch once slow, controlled, the same unsplashy arc you learned in the tepidarium, and your body answers with a chorus of ready. The elliptes gives you a final veil that sounds like a benediction, and a boundary go well, and also go, because there are others. You step out from the awning into the broad breadth of the corridor, shoulders warmed, calves unknotted, towel newly loyal over one forearm. As you pass the apodyterium sightline, your capsarius clocks you again, the faintest approving nod at your intact bundle, and your habit of leaving your rectangle of the world neater than you found it. You return the nod, a handshake without hands, and pivot toward clothes, sandals, and the small tricks that carry bath brightness into the street without spending a fortune smelling expensive on a sensible budget, and arriving at dinner polished, not perfumed, like someone who knows that etiquette is simply kindness that practiced. You angle back into the apodyterium with shoulders that behave, and calves that have retired their grievances, ready to reverse the undressing ritual without letting chaos borrow your dignity. The room's light feels a touch whiter now, part frigidarium clarity, part the way you're seeing edges instead of blur. This is the moment petty theft hopes you'll get sloppy, so you do the opposite. Tidy, methodical, elbows polite. You navigate to your peg as if it's a friend who saved you a seat, which, in truth, it has. Your capsarius sees you coming and executes the minimal nod that means your property is still your property. You answer with the purse equivalent of a smile, small, real, grateful. You take a half step to the side so your body shields your niche without turning it into a barricade. The belt lies where you left it, lounging over the folded tunic like a sleepy serpent. The sandals wait heel to wall, the double-tucked laces holding their mime school poise, silent as secrets. Joke one drops by. You consider whispering "good job" to the sandals and decide not to start a rumor that you talk to footwear. Mainstream fact hangs like the peg itself. Theft at the baths was common enough to show up in satire and inscriptions. Capsari were both deterrent and occasionally accused accomplices, which says less about any one attendant and more about the simple truth that crowds invite both courtesy and mischief. You tidy your towel and tap each item with 2 fingers, in order: tunic, belt, sandals like calling roll. The list answers present without improvisation. Redressing is choreography in reverse. You shake the tunic once to wake it from its linen nap, then lift it in a clean arc that doesn't brush the floor or your neighbor's airspace. The neck finds its home, the hem slips obediently down, the fabric remembers your shape without commentary. You pin the fibula with that same controlled twist you practiced earlier. No wrestling, no linen as sail theatrics. The belt follows. It's not humble and secure, the coiled end tucked so it won't stage a curtain call mid-street. Historians still argue whether changing rooms were staffed in sufficient numbers to truly watch every peg in the busiest complexes, or whether vigilance was more communal than contractual regulars watching out for one another while capsari played concentric circles of attention. You enact both models. You trust your watcher, and you become, briefly, someone else's watcher, by side-eyeing the room for oddities: hovering hands, itinerant fingers, the telltale drift of a stranger's towel across a stranger's peg. Nothing trips an alarm. You breathe easier and keep your posture relaxed, because tension reads like invitation. A fringed tidbit floats by, courtesy of the veteran with the rosemary wrist. He murmurs that a dab of vinegar on a cloth, just a whisper, cuts any lingering oil smell and makes cheap olive pass for, "Oh, this person knows things." You produce a tiny scrap moistened at the water basin, ghost it with a touch of vinegar from the communal cruet, and pat the inside of your collar. The air around you shifts from oiled mortal to clean as a proverb, which is exactly the budget luxury you were after. Now for the smelling expensive on very little chapter. You remember the elliptes laurel note and the rosemary rumour, and you aim for quiet layers instead of loud declarations. You rub your palms once on the rosemary wrist, then smooth them over your tunic's shoulders, transfer by suggestion. You produce a lemon peel you traded for earlier, near the snack stall, cunning, fold it skin side out, and give it a delicate pinch so it expresses the thinnest mist onto the inside of your belt. The result is memory, not perfume. You will smell like someone who walked past a good grove, not someone who tried to buy one. Joke 2 bows in. You knight yourself, Sir Subtle, and immediately revoke all rights to fanfare. Sandals next. This is where people lose both gear and dignity. You kneel with the calm of someone who has already learned the floor's opinions, and you lace with the double tuck that the mime bequeathed to you by rumour. The knot sits snug, the tails tuck in, and you test the first step before trusting all your weight to the marble. Silence. You mentally award the sandals their final diploma and file them under loyal. As you work, you keep your bundle small. The towel folds into thirds, then again, and nests between belt and tunic like a well-behaved cloud. You do not leave anything that can be accidentally collected. You do not place coins on the bench where the bench can develop entrepreneurial aspirations. Your tessera today's marked token slides into your belt knot for the walkout, a souvenir of belonging that doubles as proof if anyone at the door has an afternoon zeal for auditing. A quiet microdrama rises 2 pegs down. A youth pats his niche and discovers a missing pin. His face performs the one-act play, "My mother will notice." The capsarius glides over, produces a spare fibula from the drawer of miracles, and exchanges it for a small coin and a very large gratitude. Petty theft avoided, small commerce achieved, dignity salved. You and the veteran share a look that translates to, "The machine worked." You tuck the lesson away, carry 1 spare or 1 trick. Today, the trick is vinegar and citrus. Tomorrow it might be a bootlace. Mainstream anchor, newly relevant. Many bathhouses posted small rules: rinse before pools, don't loiter in thresholds, mind your belongings, codifying the obvious so the obvious didn't need to be argued daily. You obey them on principle, and because they are good theatre. Nothing more elegant than a room where everyone knows when to move and when to still. You perform the final check, ritual, pat the peg. Check the floor under the bench for escapee pins. Run a fingertip under the belt to ensure the lemon didn't overperform. Glance at your sandals' knots, then look up and deliberately meet the Capsarius's eyes to say silently, "My thanks." Payment is already settled. The nod is a tip in a currency older than coin. He returns it with veil, the tidy benediction that opens the door in your head before you ever touch the jam. Joke 3. Sidles on stage as you shoulder your small bundle. You imagine a handbook titled, "How Not to Get Robbed by a Room," and the first page is just a mirror, with the caption, "Be this person tidy, present, unrushable." You close the imaginary handbook. You approve its brevity. The veteran leans in with one more kitchen-level hack. A fingertip of crushed bay leaf, warmed between the hands, passed once over hair will create the rumour of costliness without naming a flower. You accept half a leaf, practice the pass, and discover you smell faintly like authority that bakes bread, an excellent compromise. You reflect that the city runs on these little trades. A leaf here, a pinch there, courtesy everywhere the floor stays dry. Historians still argue whether small luxuries inside the baths, scented oils, massage extras, barber touches were accessible, indulgences for many or chiefly status signals for the well-off, with occasional civic subsidy days blurring the line. Standing here with a lemon, a bay leaf, and vinegar's ghost, you suspect the answer is again the Roman both, but the etiquette trick is to borrow the gestures wisely, not the budgets. A last scan catches the room's geometry, the way light boasts on bronze hooks, the way pegs turn strangers' lives into aligned rectangles, the way quiet competence needs no narrator. Your sandals navigate the aisle with the hush of co-conspirators. Your belt, citrus-kissed, decides to behave. You pass the dolphin-carved strigil emblem near the door, the crossed crescents over the oil flask, and let its motto echo one more time. Use clean, return cleaner. You've returned the scraper, the bench, the space around your peg, and, not incidentally, your own mood cleaner than you found them. At the threshold, you do the small public service move. Step aside to let a pair entering pass unobstructed, preserving the doorway's lungs. One offers a nod. You return it with the inside voice of faces. The corridor smells like warm stone and distant fennel. You take 3 deliberate breaths to lock the bath's etiquette into your posture so the street can't scrub it off at the first shouted price or jostled elbow. You have your clothes, your sandals, your coins, your dignity, and a scent profile that suggests thrift wearing a laurel. The Capsarius has his coin, and a mental note that you are a person who folds towels like promises. The room resets behind you, peg returning to neutral, peg waiting for the next human to perform the minor miracle of changing in public without making a scene. You turn toward the door that leads to voices, olives, and the pre-dinner drift, satisfied that you have done the unglamorous art well. You did not lose a pin, you did not misplace a coin, you did not become a story, except maybe a helpful one whispered later. Tie your sandals like that, smell like that, say gracias like you meant it. The city is a grand machine, the baths are its velvet gear. Your small teeth fit now, polished, ready to mesh. You step into the soft weather of post-bath conversation, where words move like boats with their lanterns down small, warm, unhurried. The walkway outside the apodyterium becomes a salon stitched from sandals and low laughter. Stone benches host clusters of acquaintances sorted by invisible magnets. Profession, neighbourhood, how many olives they can name without starting an argument. You tune your voice to the room's key. Friendly, modest, informed enough to be invited later. Not so informed you spear anyone's ego like a fig at market. You begin with safe ground. Weather is the Republic's favourite political party. Warm today, you say to the baker, but the hypercaust ran like a well-tuned lyre. He smiles into his towel and agrees, adding that the caldarium's bench by the east wall has the best heat gradient, if the fire lads have had their bread. The joke is bread-flavoured. Everyone approves. You offer a soft laugh and tuck away the secret like a recipe. Joke 1 tiptoes in. You briefly consider running for office on a platform of more benches of precisely that temperature, but withdraw before the first debate. No shouting in the tepidarium, no shouting in life. Mainstream fact shuffles into place with your tone. Baths doubled as social hubs, where small talk greased bigger gears, patrons caught up on market gossip, arranged lectures in the attached libraries, or courted patrons for tomorrow's business. You let your role be the soft hinge on which encounters swing. To one artisan you say, "The mosaic in the tepidarium new tesserae near the bird's tail?" He brightens at being seen for his work rather than his sweat, and explains the colour shift imported blue from a recently reopened quarry without raising his voice. You nod with the delight of someone who likes colour more than credit, and he quietly shifts you into the category good to know. There's not Teljafery. A little cluster near the door debates bread sourdough versus a sweetened festival loaf, and you hover at the polite edge until a gap opens for a sentence. Festival loaves smell better than they taste when you're still steaming, you say, tapping your wrist where rosemary lingers. Plain bread, a sip of watered wine, then feast. The group grins because you have entered the conversation through appetite, not opinion, and appetite is politics that never topples statues. A man in a clean tunic crest trim, the minor nobility's autograph asks where you source your bay. You give the same shrug you gave when an elliptes laurel drifted by. From a neighbour with a generous shrub, he catalogues you as someone who knows a neighbour, a social currency superior to knowing a shop. Historians still argue whether the bath's flattened status in practice or merely softened its edges, patricians and plebs sharing steam yet still orbiting their customary centres. From your vantage point, the answer today is softened. The silver-haired bather from the frigidarium trades weather jokes with a bricklayer whose forearms qualify as a thesis. Neither bows, both nod. You mirror that courage of ease, sharing space with deference, but not deference's coat of self-erasure. You sidestep topics with poor manners, litigation, money owed, cousin's scandal. Instead, you offer small civic observations. The water in the labrum ran clearer than last week, you murmur, like praising a road recently patched. And the Strigil stand has 2 new dolphins. The baker catches the reference and grins a callback to the rumour of a poet forced to fund replacements. The group enjoys that you remember the city's inside jokes without making them your personality. A fringed tidbit floats through the circle in a conspiratorial whisper. Someone claims there's a barber near the east portico who can perform a silent shave. A ritual so noiseless that nearby bathers swear they can hear their thoughts tidy themselves. You raise your eyebrows at the notion and reply with the flexible civility that keeps rumour from turning into rancour. Silence is rare coin. Perhaps I'll spend some there. You do not ask for a price. You do not scoff. You let the tidbit be a small dessert, not a new religion. You toss out a safe opinion that signals reading without reciting. The new plane trees in the palaestra court took the heat well this week. Whoever chose them knows shade like a sculptor knows planes. It's a compliment to an unnamed gardener and to the city both. The artisan nods. The crest trim smiles faintly. A young scribe files the line for later theft which you will permit, because good lines are communal baths for the mouth. Joke, 2 walks by in sandals and leaves a note. You almost say, I'm writing a scroll on benches, their emotional arc. Then settle for, the east bench is generous if you arrive with generous shoulders. The scribe laughs at the slyness. The bricklayer chimes in, generous shoulders are easier after generous bread. You are now a thread in the tapestry, not the tapestry. Ideal. You keep your glance soft and your focus local. The city's big news grain shipments, a senator's latest flourish, can be argued in wine shops by people with sharper knives. Here, your trade is detail. The tepidarium's ceiling carried sound like velvet today. You offer. Even the bucket sounded polite. The bricklayer lifts a finger to point out a hairline crack only he could see. You admire without offering advice to a man who lays stone for a living. Respect is a quiet binary. Either you have it, or you make everyone do small algebra until they wish you'd bathe elsewhere. A minor dispute drifts close enough to smell, whether it's elegant to bring your own ariballos if the bath's oil is perfectly serviceable. One insists personal flasks show preparedness. Another calls it ostentation. Historians still argue whether personal kit in public spaces signal prudence or preening, with context, and how shiny or bronze, doing most of the talking. You choose a sentence that is a bridge, not a plank. A tidy flask makes sense for a traveller. A tidy habit makes sense for a regular. Both nod because you gave each a rope without tying either into a knot. You accept a watered wine sip from a vendor who floats through with cups like little moons. The wine is cool, the water clean, the price fair. You praise the water first. It marks you as someone who knows clarity has a cost. The vendor, recognizing a partnership of tone, mentions a stall just outside that sells cheese salted with bay ash. Light as a cloud, unless it rains. You smile at the joke and ask how early they sell out. The baker supplies the hour without being asked, because bakers read the city's appetite the way sailors read wind. Now you know when to stroll by for a gentle bite that will not upstage dinner. Joke 3 perches on your shoulder like a house sparrow. When someone mentions the new, after heat, Before wine blend at the elliptis stall, you almost say, "I'm saving my coins for the after wine, remember names blend." But you instead murmur, "Laurel suits the evening best if it's carried in a story, not the air." The crest trim's smile lengthens by a hair. The scribe scribbles nothing and remembers everything. You weave in a compliment that travels well. Your throw in trigon had the mercy of a baker's hand. The baker blushes at being complimented via his craft, not his strength. You avoid comparisons that stack people into ladders. You build benches. Benches seat more friends. Someone tests your general knowledge with a gentle toss. Library added new scrolls, agriculture treatises. Care to opine on irrigation? You parry without pretending. I know just enough to admire the canals that feed our baths and the gardeners who don't waste a drop. It's an answer shaped like respect, with an exit built in. You will not drown in someone else's expertise to prove you can tread water. Mainstream anchor before you drift towards snacks. Large baths, often adjoined libraries and lecture halls. Chatter could wander from steam to scroll, from benches to books, without leaving the campus of comfort. You gesture toward the library with your chin, an invitation without pressure. I'll read after dinner, warm bread makes better scholars. The bricklayer groans happily at the mention of bread. The scribe concedes the point on a technicality called hunger. A last fringe morsel emerges from a man with ink-stained fingers. He swears a philosopher once tested the bath's status-flattening theory by donning a cheap tunic and counting nods received pre- and post-steam. Results, he claims, favoured post-steam by a wide margin. Cleanliness and glow outperformed fabric. You grin and add, "Civility is the only luxury that multiplies when shared." The circle murmurs assent. A new acquaintance's eyes say, "We will remember you for that sentence." You angle your exit with the same courtesy you used to enter. A small veil to the group, a nod specific to each face. Baker, artisan, crest trim, scribe, so no one feels like scenery in your day. Someone calls after you. Light bites outside. You answer with a hand tilt that means yes, and not now polite deferral, because the outline of your evening includes olives, a sliver of cheese, and arriving at dinner neither starved nor boastful. You carry your small successes like citrus in a sleeve, fragrant if crushed, otherwise purely potential. As you move away, you keep your shoulders low, your pace moderate, your ears available. You have threaded status without snagging it, traded sentences like coins with clean faces, and left behind a rumour that you might be worth inviting next time a private garden opens for music. You did it with weather, benches, birds on mosaics, bay leaves, and the kind of opinions that don't need sharpening before use. The city feels friendlier by a degree you could measure with rosemary. You drift toward the bath's threshold, where the city resumes at a lower simmer, and the air carries the market's evening chord olives, bread crust, the grill's hopeful smoke. This is the limb between steam and supper, the space where appetite gets manners. You are not here to feast, you are here to tune. The stalls arranged like punctuation marks outside the gate. Know this, and advertise accordingly. Slivers, sips, pinches, a plate that could fit in a palm, and a price that fits a pocket. You set your pace to the clock of courtesy, enough time to arrive glowing, not late. Enough food to arrive steady, not full. The olive seller greets you with the confidence of a person who can name 10 shades of green without moving his lips. He offers a toothpick and 3 bowls, brine bright, time-kissed, and a small, swaggering amphora of black olives, so cured they look like night with a shine. You choose 2 of the bright and 1 time, then pause before the swagger. Joke 1 taps your sleeve. You imagine the black olive announcing itself at dinner before you can, and you pass for now. You praise the brine instead, because praising water is a generous habit. Mainstream fact hums beneath the clatter of cups. Vendors clustered near large thermae in Rome and the provinces, selling light, fair olives, nuts, bread, cheese, watered wine so bathers could calibrate their bodies post-heat. The point wasn't a second meal, it was landfall after swimming through steam. You buy a narrow heel of bread, warm from the interior, the crust singing at a volume only your fingertips hear. You tear it with the controlled joy of a person who has rediscovered fingers. You take a diluted wine from a boy with a tray, 1 part wine, 2 parts water, the arithmetic of composure. He offers a stronger mix with a look that suggests romance, revolution, or both. You tip your head toward your quieter cup. Before dinner, I caught clarity, you say. He grins and files your face under returns, coin and sentences both. You sip, The wine is young and tidy, the water is patient, your stomach writes a note to your future self. Thank you for not staging a festival out here. A fringed tidbit wafts from the nut cellar. He swears a pinch of ground cumin on almonds, keeps the warmth balanced after the cold plunge, and if you eat them 2 at a time, never 3, you'll walk like poetry, not like a drum. You buy a small cone of the cumin almonds, partly for the line, mostly for the scent. 2 at a time it is. The trick works insofar as your gait remains an essay rather than a manifesto. Historians still argue whether Romans widely watered their wine in daily life, or if the ratio varied by class, hour, and intent, philosophers favouring longer conversation, revellers favouring less arithmetic. Here, outside the baths, the evidence tilts toward moderation. Cups half-strength move like birds between hands, and no one tries to sing a ballad with their shirt off. You angle toward a low wall where shade lingers and stand. Not sit the better to keep your body in transit, not camp. The cheese stall tempts with a young sheep's cheese kissed with bay ash. You ask for a shaving, not a slab, and the seller smiles at your grammar. He scrapes a thin, pale ribbon that curls on your bread like a note delivered by a quiet messenger. You eat in 4 unshowy bites, alternating with olives and those twin almonds, and your appetite unclenches in increments. Joke 2 twirls a lemon peel in your mind. You briefly consider inventing a new ritual, 1 raisin to bless the next conversation. Then recall you are already performing 3 rituals: small bites, small sips, small ego. Your sense of time is now an instrument you can tune. You check the shadow line along the bath's outer wall. Dinner is a well-appointed roomer 45 minutes away. That makes these next 10 minutes your rehearsal for arriving composed. You walk 1 slow loop around the small garden court plane trees, practicing their evening, then return to the stalls for a final negotiation. 1 more watered sip. Yes. Another heel of bread. No. A fig. Perhaps. The fig vendor holds up a specimen that could star in a fresco. You decline gently. Figs can dethrone restraint with a single bite. You promise yourself 1 after dinner, if you still remember your own name. Mainstream anchor drops like a pebble into a calm basin. Roman dinner, cena, typically unfolded in courses. Gustatio, appetizer, the main stages, then sweet bites and fruit stretching over hours in company. Arriving hungry but not frantic, help the evening's river run without sudden rapids. You are engineering your river now. Enough sugar to smile at stories, not enough to start them circling the room on your behalf. The debate hums near the wine boy's tray, whether a pre-cena cup is wise or wasteful. 1 regular claims a quick, undiluted gulp sharpens the wit. Another counters that wit sharpened by water lasts longer. Historians still argue whether pre-dinner drinking was common courtesy, or a sign you couldn't wait to perform. The city, as ever, made room for both. You lift your half-strength again, the cup's clay cooler than your hand, and toast the long game. You practice the art of not crowding. At a stall where skewers hiss, you stand 1 pace back and choose to enjoy the smell instead of becoming part of it. You compliment the vendor's onion handling that char is geometry, and leave the skewer for whoever needs calories more than you need to impress yourself. You let hunger be a fellow traveller rather than a driver. Your stomach, reassured, sits down and buckles its own sandal. A vendor of posca, the soldier's sour drink, vinegar, water, herbs, raises a ladle. You consider and then accept a thimble's worth. The tang presses a clean bookmark into your palate, fringed tidbit to pocket. Some swear a tiny posca before wine keeps the evening from climbing your head. Others claim it makes you talk like a praetor. You take the useful part, the clean bookmark, and leave the praetor for people who enjoy speeches. Joke 3 scuffs its sandal in the dust. You nearly ask the posca seller if he has a remember names blend. Instead you say, "This will help me praise the bread with accuracy," and he bows as if you've paid twice. Which, in a way, you did. You touch your wrist where rosemary still whispers through the olive, and you feel how the little hacks have held. Bay brushed over hair, vinegar's ghost at the collar, lemon under the belt, cumin on the almonds. You smell faintly like a capable hillside with a degree in manners, which is the graduate program you signed up for this afternoon. You check your sandals, the double tuck remains a masterpiece, and pat your belt knot where the tessera rides as a secret souvenir. A dolphin you can't see smiling on a coin you won't spend. Across the way, a pair of friends enters into the most Roman of scheduling puzzles. Arrive early and risk looking overeager. Arrive late and risk losing the best couch. You split their difference by choosing purposeful punctuality, on time, with a glow that looks like good planning rather than vanity. Historians still argue whether elite dinner invitations coded strict arrival windows or tolerated the city's creative relationship with clocks. Your host tonight tends toward gentle exactitude. You align with gentle exactitude. Before you leave the stalls, you make a small civic deposit. You shift an abandoned cup to the vendor's stack, brush a stray olive pit off the walkway with your sandal's edge, and flatten a wrinkle in the linen awning so it won't drip on the next person's sleeve if the night cools into dew. Use clean, return cleaner. The motto has hands now. The vendors notice, silently promoting you to can be trusted with the last good fig when the crates are thin. You take one last watered mouthful and let it sit at the back of your tongue long enough to become promise rather than splash. You thank the olive seller by naming his time, olives, elegant, a word that costs nothing and buys you a nod you will enjoy again tomorrow. You thank the boy with the tray with a coin's clink and an angle of your head that says, "Your ratios are wisdom." He salutes with the ladle like a tiny oar. Now the city's evening opens like a fan cooler air. Lower voices, lamps making coins of light along the street. You turn your feet toward dinner, muscles measured, breath unhurried, mouth refreshed but not perfumed, mind tuned to listen first, speak later. You carry a small bag of cumin almonds for a friend you're hoping to sit near, because sharing is the quickest way to turn a couch into a bench that accepts you. Your glow has settled from headline to font, the readable kind that hosts like, and your stomach is composed enough to applaud without attempting a solo. You rehearse the first sentence you'll say when you cross the threshold. Not announcement, not apology, just neighbourly weather. The breeze carried rosemary all the way from the baths. It's true, it's small. It opens a door without making anyone walk through it. You glide your hand once along your tunic to smooth any scandalous enthusiasm, then step into the lane at the pace of a person who knows where they're going and has the courtesy to arrive exactly when they said they would, warm, clean, and calibrated to be company rather than performance. You head home through streets the colour of warm bread. Your steps small commas in a sentence the city has been drafting since noon. The baths have taught your posture to be kind. The cumin almonds in your pouch have taught your pockets manners. Doorways bloom lamplight. You practice your earlier ritual pause, one breath, so you enter each little world with the gentleness that made the tepidarium love you. You're not just clean, you're calibrated. Dinner is a practiced play, and you arrive like an actor who knows their cue but doesn't chew the scenery. Your host's doorkeeper checks the list with a look that says, "We notice punctuality." You answer with a nod that says, "I learned it from Steam. Cloaks are taken. Sandals behave. Thank you, mime." And your rosemary whisper shakes hands with the room's laurel. You greet fellow guests by name, the world's cheapest luxury, and accept a rinsing bowl at the threshold. You let cool water kiss your fingers, then dry with the mapper you had the foresight to bring, or borrow, because grease on couches is a social misdemeanor. Mainstream fact takes a seat at the couch's foot. Roman cena flows in courses, gustatio to wake the mouth, eggs, olives, maybe a drizzle of honeyed garum. The heavier dishes that do the talking, then sweet bites and fruit to land the evening softly. You pace yourself like a hypercaust, steady heat, no smoke. You recline if that's the custom here, or sit if this is a modest household. Historians still argue whether ordinary middling families reclined nightly or saved full triclinium ceremony for showier evenings, but good manners travel in either posture. You practice table etiquette that would make your capsarius proud. Don't reach across a neighbour's plate like Caesar crossing the Rubicon. Let the platter come to you. Break bread with clean fingers, use the spoon for broths, and remember the knife is for cutting food, not conversations. Praise the bread before the sauce, and the water before the wine. Vendors and aqueducts both deserve their laurels. When toasting, you keep it short. Feliciter will carry an entire friendship if you let it, and sip rather than audition for Bard of the Amphora. Joke one leans in. You briefly consider a speech, thanking the Strigil for making this fig taste like a sonnet, then wisely let the fig do its own oratory. You keep the talk in the safe lanes you rehearsed outside the baths. Weather as music, benches as philosophy, mosaics as quietly glorious gossip. The baker beams when you mention the east wall gradient. The artisan warms when you notice the tiny blue tesserae near the bird's tail. You are the person who sees things and does not demand applause for seeing them. When a guest blusters into politics with elbows out, you practice the frigidarium glide. One prime number of breaths, then a gentle pivot. Did you taste the thyme on these olives? Elegant. The table thanks you by forgetting to argue. Fringed tidbit scurries in under the table. A boy collecting platters slips you the rumour that his master sometimes sprinkles the floor with perfumed sawdust for festivals. Saffron if he's feeling flush, bay ash if he's feeling clever. You glance down at tonight's plain sweep and feel secretly pleased. Elegance that whispers is the kind that lasts. You do, however, use a small crumb of bread as a finger wipe between saucy bites, a common trick in rooms where napkins mustn't work overtime. The crumb goes to the dog with the resume of a professional confidant, and your tunic remains a citizen in good standing. A bowl of olives surfaces and, like the labrum in steam, asks for restraint. You take 2, not 4 habit, not hunger, and pass the dish with the same handle-first care you gave the strigil. The dolphins stamped on those bronze crescents flicker through your mind, and you hear the motto again: use clean, return cleaner. You apply it to platters, to topics, to the space you occupy on the couch. You resolve to leave all 3 in better order than you found them. Someone brings up a poet's new satire, and whether he actually paid for those replacement strigils. Historians still argue whether becomes a table game, and you win one round by offering the gentlest answer of the night. We may never know, but the dolphins shine. Laughter, not loud, not long, just enough to put a gold edge on the evening. Joke 2 paddles by. You nearly promise to write an epic about not slipping on wet tiles, but decide the muse prefers dry floors. You keep an eye on the servants' flow the way you watched rotation in the caldarium. Don't block doorways, don't backlog cups, don't help in a way that makes helpers work twice. When the host nods toward the wine, you ask for it, temperate, and the cup returns measured, watered like a long conversation. You raise it, meet 3 sets of eyes, and clink softly, pottery kissing pottery, not cymbals. Your pulse stays in the good district, attentive, curious, incapable of starting a fire. Dessert is a clean landing dates, a slice of pear, a speculative fig you promised yourself earlier. You eat like an editor, remove nothing essential, add nothing showy, stop before the paragraph begs. Joke 3 perches on your spoon. You consider naming the spoon Strigil Jr. for how tidily it gathers sweetness, then demote the bit to an internal footnote. Across the room, someone hums contentment. You hum back, inaudible, in the same key. When it's time to go, you don't stand like a trumpet. You rise like the tepidarium taught you, smooth, leaving the air behind you the same shape it was. You offer thanks to the host with a sentence tailored to the room. Your water is as polite as your bread. It lands. Cloak on, sandals still silent. Bay rumour warming the air around your hair, you step into the lane. The walk home is an afterglow dressed as a street. Doors close like eyelids, and the city's breath slows. You pass a fountain and salute the lion's mouth that started your evening. You pass the bath's outer wall and nod to the invisible hypercaust, still writing comfort under stone. You carry civility, like a small lamp. The lamp carries you. Let the streets grow quieter, each step a little softer, each breath a little longer. You keep the evening's glow folded around you like a light cloak. Nothing heavy, just that steady warmth that lingers after good company and clean stone. Picture the doorway you left, the lamplight pooled on the threshold. Picture your sandals finding their own way, noiseless, sure, the double tuck holding without asking for attention. The city thins to silhouettes, a plane tree etching its simple grammar against the sky, a high window closing with the hush of a turned page. As you walk, let the details blur kindly. The dolphins on bronze, the rosemary at your wrist, the small coin of laughter at the table, all of it settles like silt in clear water, drifting downward until the bottom is even again. Your shoulders remember the elliptes' slow commas. Your breath remembers the tepidarium's measured line. Every exhale is a gentle release, a careful setting down. Every inhale is a quiet return. Home waits with unremarkable generosity. A place to sit, a cup to sip, a room that doesn't ask for performance. You move through it with the same courtesy you practiced in steam doors opened softly, corners taken wide, the air left undisturbed. If you like, you can rinse your hands once more, not because they are unclean, but because the cool water writes calm in a language the body never forgets. Dry them slowly. Let the towel be a cloud that doesn't hurry. Now the room darkens by agreeable degrees. The fan hums like low conversation 2 rooms away. You find your place, ease down, and allow the day to close itself. Nothing more needed. Clean in, Cleaner out, breath in, breath out. Heat remembered, coolness welcome. The last image can be simple. Lamplight on polished stone, a small pool unmoving, and you, already drifting, already safe, already quiet.